In this world, there are first and third category healers, and one extremely powerful, unlicensed healer who operates underground is always surrounded by women. He's always ready to heal and do whatever needs to be done, as long as he's paid the price he deems fair. A young elf girl wakes up and says, "Good morning" to Xenos. Then, she heads straight to the kitchen to prepare for breakfast. A few minutes later, Xenos finally gets up, returns the good morning to the elf, and sits down to drink his black tea. According to Lily, in this world, a healer is third class if they only heal wounds, second class if they heal and comfort, and first class if they make the world a better place. By the way, the story of the Kingdom of Herzith is very much about healers, as they have greatly helped develop this nation, earning them a very important position in this society. The hospital is where healers gather to learn sophisticated healing magic and obtain their license before starting their journey as healers. However, in a corner of the kingdom, there is someone who has not received formal education and does not have a license to practice healing. Speaking of this person, after healing another patient, Xenos receives thanks and payment for his service. Seeing the low-value coins on the table, the young healer responds that he's always willing to heal, if the patient is willing to pay the price. With the departure of the attended young man, Lily remembers that today she has a house visit, and the doctor informs her that he should only return at night. With that, the elf commits to preparing dinner while the human is away. Alone now, Lily lights the fire and chops the carrot to prepare the meal in a pot, until Carmilla smells the food and comes over to see what's cooking for later. As if there's one thing that gets her excited, it's Lily's dinner. The elf asks her to leave it to her. After all, she's training to someday be Xenos' wife. Trusting her friend, Carmilla says she'll rest in the room for a while and flies off to take a nap. Then, a woman named Zofia enters the house looking for the doctor. Lily informs her that he went to make a house call, so the lady with shark-like serrated teeth decides to wait there for the young man. Honestly, she hoped to have that handsome guy all to herself if she arrived early, but luck isn't always on our side. In the following scene, it's time for Linga to enter in search of the most sought-after doctor by the female figures of Herzith. Lily gives the same warning to the Catwoman, who regrets not being able to lick Mr. Xenos entirely while receiving a stroke on the tail, or rather, as you prefer to call it. Zofia informs her that she arrived first and suggests that the beast return home. Then the two start a duel of sinister stares, until Lily joins the competition. Similarly, another woman arrives who manages to be even noisier than the others. Busting through the door, Loa came to play doctor with the doctor. Lily once again informs her that the man is out on a house visit and asks the big woman to fix the door before anything else. When the whole gang gathers, Loa deduces that they came for Lily's food, but Zofia replies that only the big woman would do that. Speaking of the little one, the petite elf collects her secret ingredient and throws it in the pot. Having done that, she invites the girls to eat there when Xenos returns, and Lo makes it clear that that was the idea. Zofia accepts since she's already there, and Linga confirms that she's going to devour the food without hesitation. Thus, Lily looks forward to the group meal and then retires to store the laundry she washed. Zofia confesses that the smell of the food is killing her, and Linga can't hold out until dinner, so she and Lo go to the pot to grab the food beforehand. Upon tasting, the big woman and the cat recognize the deliciousness of that meal, so they overstep their bounds by attacking the pot outright and shamelessly. Zofia warns that Lily won't like this at all, but upon smelling it better, she decides to try it too to see if it's to the doctor's liking. Outside, Lily was calmly doing her chores in the company of nature's animals, and this harmony brought her the peace she needed to lie down on the grass and breathe for a while. Anyway, she wonders if Xenos will come back earlier. Back in the kitchen, the Herzith sweetheart trio had the nerve to clean out the entire pot that was meant for dinner. Boldly, Linga blames the other two, so Lo takes the opportunity to do the same. Zofia questions whether the two are suffering from amnesia, and the Catwoman agrees it's a good idea to pretend they don't remember anything. The big woman suggests that they prepare more food, and the shark-toothed one thinks it's a good idea, but it was already late. Trying to maintain the peace she brought from the yard, Lily arrives and politely asks what the hell happened. Soon, the three culprits are seated at the table to tell the story, but all of them act clueless, pretending they had just arrived. With slightly less patience, Lily slams her hand on the table and repeats her question. Then Zofia spills that the smell was irresistible and she decided to taste a bit of the food. Linga argues that her arms moved on their own, while Lo admits that the stuff was too good. Seeing that the elf is getting angry, the three quickly convene and conclude that the little one is really ticked off. Linga thinks the digestion won't be good, and Lo suggests she consult with Xenos, although Zofia thinks it's a bad idea to bother the doctor with such nonsense. However, unfortunately, the fur on the Catwoman's tail is rougher than usual, but she hopes the doctor will pet it as usual. Zofia thinks it's more likely the guy would inject mayonnaise into his veins, and Linga responds that feeling jealous isn't godly. Meanwhile, Loa believes the shark tooth should be jealous of the buff body she has, even though Linga believes Xenos would prefer 1,000 times a furry tail like hers. Zofia comments that the two are losing focus of the conversation, so Linga bluntly calls the poor woman a big lizard. The lizard calls the beast a little dog, and Lo is sad to be left out of the string of gratuitous insults. Returning to the conversation, Lily makes it clear that Zeninho will be upset if the three of them fight, and that all she wanted was to have a meal with her friends. Facing such a heartfelt outpouring, Zofia lowers her head and apologizes. Linga does the same and commits to helping with another dinner, as does Lo. Either way, the elf regrets that there are no more ingredients to make another meal. Hearing this, another figure steps in to question what was just said, as it certainly does not sound good. Linga is startled and kneels before Carmilla, the ghostly creature who was eager to eat Lily's cooking and has just found out it won't be happening. Because of this, perhaps it would be good to make another stew, but this time with a soul broth to make it tastier. Having said that, the other two culprits also kneel before Carmilla, but Lily has a less hostile idea. Perhaps it would be good to bring more ingredients. Obviously, the three foodies prefer this idea and rush to get what was requested. Next, Carmilla asks if Lily shouldn't have been angrier with them, but the blonde confesses she is serene. In turn, if they had drunk Carmilla's beverages, she would have cursed all the girls. The elf responds that she acts more calmly because she is mature and likes it when everyone is together. For her, the real problem is not knowing if she will manage to prepare the food by the time Xenos returns. Speaking of the doctor, he walks through the city streets in the late afternoon, until a girl passes by him in pain. A man with a malicious tone of voice emerges behind her after searching for her all over. The girl argues that she went to the hospital because of a stomachache but ended up not being seen due to lack of money. The man grabs the girl's hair and makes it clear that having a stomachache is not enough for a slave to take a break. Then he takes her away violently. The man takes the beast girl to a cemetery and throws her onto an old, dirty tombstone, which he believes is perfect for a semi-human like her. In the midst of this, a shadow emerges from the tomb and enters the woman. Unnoticed, the owner of the servant kicks her belly hard and with disdain and then leaves, saying that the slave will only be fed if she shows results. That said, she gets up and tears the man's stomach open eagerly, as an energetic mass contours her body, as if adding to that disproportionate strength. Seeing that things are heating up, the man runs through a part of the city that is in ruins, screaming for help, until he comes again to Xenos. He pleads for the boy's interference, but Xenos criticizes the self-centeredness of the individual. The man argues that he was just doing his job, but changes the subject when he explains that it was just something related to agriculture. Either way, he is severely injured and is willing to pay if the boy can do something. Thus, at the same moment that the beast emerges again to attack her master, the healer pushes the victim's body to prevent him from dying. With irony, Xenos asks what happened to make the girl so angry. Then he dodges the stones she throws at him. The owner of the servant asks the young man to end the girl, but Xenos refuses, since his job is not to kill people. Outraged, the aggressor insists that an aristocrat like him could not end up dead over such a trifle, and that it's just a matter of buying another slave in her place if she dies. Upon hearing this, Xenos is carried to a traumatic memory and clarifies that his role is to save as many people as he can. At that moment, the semi-human throws a huge rock at the healer, but he imbues his fist with mana and destroys the stone into pieces. The noble is startled and wants to know what kind of healer is capable of doing this. The woman moves swiftly across the battlefield, and the doctor knows that her speed is unusual even for her race. Regardless, with a magic shield, he repels an attack he suffers and isolates the attacker towards a destroyed house. Already weakened, the building lets its wall fall, crushing the aristocrat. After resolving the conflict, Xenos goes to the demi-human to lift her up, but the girl seems too scared to accept help. Additionally, the malevolent aura that surrounds her manifests again with force around her body, so the doctor understands that she is possessed. Then he places his own arm in the girl's mouth and uses his healing to expel the intruder. Trying to understand what kind of agriculture involves servants being possessed by spirits of the dead, the healer destroys that malignant manifestation and treats the wound. Seeing that the boy healed the servant's broken leg in seconds, the aristocrat emerges from the debris and recognizes that this doctor is incredibly powerful. Thinking this, he pleads for help, but Xenos replies that his shift is over for today, so he asks if he can see the man tomorrow. The noble explains that by tomorrow he will already be dead and demands to be healed right now, so the doctor requires an additional payment. Several gold coins are handed over to him, but this is far from what Xenos would like to receive. After all, he is an underground healer and has no license. Therefore, he asks to take the aristocrat's slave as compensation. Thus, the noble agrees and is healed. Xenos takes the beast woman to his house, informs her that he has purchased her, and asks her name. When the girl replies that her name is Till, the man tells her to undress, as her purchase was expensive, and he needs to know if the servant is in good condition. After hesitating for a few moments, the girl does what was commanded. Then Xenos discovers that she has a gallstone, which causes inflammation. Without delay, he completely heals the semi-human, who does not understand how he was able to do this without any enchantment or magic circle. Naturally, she thanks him for it, but her master would like her to also show service beyond just thanking. Till assures that the master can ask whatever he wants, so he hands her a notebook and asks her to look for something. Immediately, the servant set out in search of what had been requested and came upon a plant that was exactly what he had been looking for. Not quite understanding everything, she wanted to know if the job was just that, as she thought there might be more for her to do. However, the healer assured her that her work was done. Even more confused, Till claimed she was still in debt. But as Xenos had already said, she had paid what she owed. In fact, he explained that he always demands a fair price for the work he does, and pays a fair price for what he expects others to do. In Till's case, she found the leaves that he could not have found on his own, which means their value was equal to what the doctor had done for the semi-human. Thus, their debts were settled. With that, the boy tore up the servitude contract and informed her that her life was now her own. Overjoyed, Till admitted she didn't exactly know what she wanted to do from now on, but she was going to live to find out, and she would come back to tell the doctor when she did. Moreover, she wanted to know if she could return one day to see Mr. Xenos again, and he confirmed that she could always count on him as a clandestine doctor, as long as she had some payment to offer, of course. After their interaction, the doctor returned home and was greeted by Lily, who promptly informed him that the food wasn't ready yet. Just then, the 3 dinner thieves arrived with the ingredients. Along with them, Carmilla appeared to comment that Xenos seemed to have had so much fun it was as if he'd met a new girl. After teasing him, she disappeared just as she had appeared, while Lily celebrated that they could make a lot of food with everything they had brought. Xenos could hardly wait, while Lily committed to making black tea for everyone to enjoy together. After this, we see a man toss a gold coin in front of Xenos, perhaps something he'd never seen in his entire life, the kind of reward the poor never receive. The healer asks Astan what he's implying. Astan, accompanied by his companions, reveals bluntly that they no longer need the healer. Xenos argues he's done so much for them, reminding Astan how he'd claimed they were friends. Hearing this, everyone bursts into laughter, and Astan sneers that the kid remains as naive as when he was a child. In truth, anyone would have done as long as they were disposable and could conveniently serve as a human shield. According to the leader, the poor are just cattle, and it's laughable for livestock to think it's part of the group merely because it's being fed. Xenos insists he was crucial in helping the team become prominent, but the warrior dismisses him sharply, unwilling to let the healer claim any credit using the shady magic he learned on his own. At this crucial moment, their team must impress royalty and aristocracy, and having a filthy pauper among them would only ruin their chances. Therefore, the gold coin is merely a parting gift, enough money for Xenos to go wherever he pleases, as long as he keeps quiet about ever having been a member of the Golden Phoenix. Accepting the money, Xenos walks away under the mocking laughter of his former teammates. Meanwhile, on that memorable night in Herzith, a young elf girl is assaulted in the street by two thugs drawn to the rarity of her race. The girl manages to break free from the man holding her and sprints away, but the assailant fires an arrow into her calf, causing her to collapse. Still fighting, she bites his hand as he tries to grab her again, prompting the thug to viciously retaliate with a knife. Amid this cowardly scene, Xenos wanders aimlessly through the streets, wondering what he'll do with his life, until he hears someone screaming. When he arrives, the female thug scolds her companion for stabbing their precious merchandise. Seeing the child severely bleeding on the ground, Xenos immediately offers his gold coin to buy her. Since the elf was dying anyway, the woman readily accepts the offer and leaves without further questions, satisfied with at least making a profit. Once the attackers are gone, the girl asks weakly if she's going to die. But the healer does something incredible, completely healing her in the blink of an eye so quickly that she doesn't even comprehend what happened. Overwhelmed, the elf cries with relief and joy. Xenos asks her name, and she introduces herself as Lily, feeling sorry that the man had to spend his money on her. But he reassures her, telling the girl not to feel guilty. Eventually, he introduces himself as an underground healer without any official license, who learned his craft entirely on his own. When he asks Lily where she lives, he discovers she doesn't even have a home, and the growl of her stomach reveals she hasn't eaten for some time either. Seeing this, the healer decides their first priority should be getting her new clothes and some food. They immediately head to a tavern for dinner, and Lily devours her meal as if it were the best she'd ever tasted. Delighted, she wonders aloud why he's not eating as well. But Xenos says he's simply not hungry, though the truth is he's now completely out of money. As Lily eats, he reflects on what he'll do with her next. Perhaps placing her in an orphanage in the slums would be the sensible thing. But just imagining the way she'd be treated there makes him quickly abandon that idea. Lily then asks Xenos about his work, and he confesses he was just kicked out of his group, leaving him with nowhere to go himself. His best option at the moment is simply to find employment. Suddenly, a lizardman stumbles into the tavern, wounded and begging desperately for a glass of water. Xenos quickly notices the bullet wound and burn mark on the man's arm, clearly the result of magical weaponry. The lizard confirms he was shot by mistake and just wants the agony to end. Seeing this, the tavern's healer rises to offer aid, but upon noticing the seriousness of the injury, he decides to add an enchantment to ensure a safer recovery. Right away, he performs the healing, and the matter is resolved in mere moments. In disbelief, the injured man asks the healer's name, prompting Lily to proudly announce her new friend's identity. Though unfamiliar with the name, the grateful lizardman gives Xenos 4 gold coins as payment, leaving the tavern in high spirits. However, Xenos becomes unusually quiet afterward, prompting Lily to ask what's wrong. Suddenly realizing that just as you pay restaurants for food, healers should also be compensated for their services, he's struck by inspiration. Recalling Lily's heartfelt gratitude when he healed her and realizing no one had ever sincerely thanked him before, he decides at that very moment to open a clinic to help those in need. The catch is, because he's from the slums, he won't be able to get a proper license, meaning he'll have to open an underground clinic and operate illegally. Ironically, Lily thinks this is wonderful and eagerly volunteers to help in any way she can. Xenos questions whether dragging a child into illegal business is a wise move. But as Lily herself points out, she was technically purchased by him, and she's happy to serve under legalized slavery terms. In truth, Xenos was just trying to help and never intended to own a slave. But Lily has nowhere else to go, and abandoning her on the streets wouldn't do her any favors. Agreeing with her reasoning, Xenos decides to care for the girl until he can find her a permanent home. In turn, Lily promises to serve her master devotedly, but Xenos kindly requests she avoid making statements that could be misunderstood. After leaving the tavern, the two head towards a rundown neighborhood, where Xenos expresses his desire to open the clinic amidst the rubble. Lily comments that this doesn't seem like a busy area for starting a business, to which the man explains this part of town is abandoned, perfect for an illegal operation, as setting one up downtown wouldn't exactly be smart. Searching for a house that's at least minimally livable, Xenos finally finds a home to call his own, a charming mansion that could have been plucked straight out of Berlin, circa 1945, after the Soviet invasion. Lily admits it's nice to have a place to stay and all, but honestly, this dump looks exactly like a haunted mansion, and running into a specter inside wouldn't be cool at all. Confused, Xenos asks what she's talking about, prompting Lily to clarify that specters are among the strongest undead monsters. They resemble people, but one touch is all it takes to drain the life out of you until you become nothing but a pit of despair and suffering. In the end, you turn into a ghost forced to obey their every command. In the next scene, Xenos is already opening the mansion's door and walking right in, clearly showing how much he cares about the elf girl's opinion. Seeing how things stand, Lily resorts to some kind of prayer, invoking a radiant, sacred light that drives away darkness and illuminates their path. Xenos, caught by surprise, learns that the girl can actually perform basic magic. With proper lighting now allowing them a good look around, he feels grateful to have finally found a roof over his head. Back in his days with the Golden Phoenix adventurers, he'd spent most nights alone and sleeping outdoors. Plus, the beams here are still sturdy, and with a thorough cleaning, this place would be perfect for living. However, Lily spots a shadowy figure passing by and begins disagreeing even more intensely with her master's assessment. She hides behind him for protection as both suddenly see a spirit floating down the stairs, demanding they surrender the scent of life to her. Lily cries out that this is definitely a specter, but Xenos remains calm as if nothing special is going on. According to him, he'd already guessed someone would be living here, as the house was way too good to be simply vacant. Either way, the specter lunges at the young man, who responds swiftly with healing magic, repelling the attack and disintegrating the ghost's arms. Once that's settled, Xenos casually explains that he's already defeated around 100 just like her back with his former team. For instance, one day Aston got moody and tossed the healer into the depths of an underground labyrinth full of these creatures. That's how Xenos knows healing magic is their weakness. Therefore, he kindly asks the resident ghost if she wouldn't mind lending him a portion of her home. Unable to accept this humiliation, the specter tries attacking again, only to quickly discover she can't handle this intruder alone. It's an unpleasant shock since no mortal had ever given Carmilla, the queen of specters, any trouble before. Determined, she summons her servants to dispose of the intruders. Lily panics even harder, crying out desperately for help, while Xenos scratches his head, regretting that a peaceful solution is out of the question. He immediately casts High Heal, obliterating all minor specters like dust in the wind. Shocked, Carmilla asks who exactly this human is. Xenos simply replies that he's nobody special, just an underground healer. Returning to the matter at hand, he apologizes for intruding, but emphasizes it'd really help him to have a place to sleep and some space to treat his patients. With no other choice, the ghost reluctantly grants the first floor to the human, keeping the second floor to herself. Lily can't decide whether she's happy or horrified by this arrangement. Sometime later, they've cleaned up the place, transforming it into something resembling a real clinic. Speaking of which, Lily suggests they take advantage of the nurse outfit they've prepared, using it to advertise the clinic around town. However, Xenos doesn't want the royal hospital becoming suspicious, preferring to let clients find them naturally instead. As luck would have it, someone actually appears the moment Xenos finishes saying that, and it turns out to be the lizardman he'd healed a few days prior at the tavern. To everyone's surprise, Xenos had already anticipated this visit. After all, someone suffering from a magical burn wound isn't likely to be just anyone. They typically have good reasons for avoiding regular hospitals. Impressed by the human's perceptiveness, the lizard introduces himself as Zond and asks if the healer could examine his older sister. The woman steps forward, revealing a gruesome injury caused by a magical gunshot wound. Examining the wound, Xenos believes it must have been inflicted by a poisonous magical weapon. The bullet is still lodged inside, and the surrounding flesh is decaying. She asks if he figured all that out from just one look, and the healer explains he'd nearly been turned into a guinea pig for experiments himself once. Come to think of it, he's planning on teaching those guys a lesson someday. Anyway, after further inspection, Xenos concludes her arm is beyond saving, suggesting amputation before the poison spreads any further. With a resigned sigh, like she'd just lost $5 at a bakery, the woman asks how much this little joke will cost her. Calmly, the doctor states 1 million yen. Her brother immediately protests such a steep price, but she tells him to relax, she'll handle it. Curious, she asks if he's sticking to this price, knowing she's Zofia, the tornado. Hearing this, Xenos realizes he has just scored a significant first client. After all, he knows Zofia is one of the 3 bosses who run the slums, leader of the lizard folk, and a heroine among the oppressed community members who steals from corrupt merchants to support the poor. Nevertheless, Tornado demands to be convinced why she should pay 1,000,000 yen for an amputation. Xenos clarifies he wouldn't charge that amount unless he intended to regenerate her limb entirely. Besides, he's not about to accept anyone acting arrogant in his own clinic, whether they're a queen of the hill or the Pope himself. He just expects to be paid well for his excellent services. In disbelief, Zofia admits she's never heard of a healer who can regenerate limbs. Equally surprised, Xenos had no idea other healers couldn't do it. At any rate, with the patient's permission, the doctor begins the treatment by summoning a scalpel made purely of mana. Zofia finds herself once again astonished by yet another hidden talent of this guy, something Xenos doesn't really get. After all, how else could other doctors possibly perform incisions? Setting those thoughts aside, he applies a healing spell to the affected area to numb the pain, and then proceeds to cut Zofia's arm open. According to him, this is where things get complicated. First, he casts a defensive spell to stop the bleeding, simultaneously applying healing magic to drastically amplify the regeneration of the wounded area. Then, methodically, he restores the bones in the arm first, followed by nerves, blood vessels, muscles, and finally, the skin. Once completed, the Tornado has a brand new arm. Exhausted after flawlessly performing such a procedure, the healer takes a seat to catch his breath. Everyone is stunned by what they've just witnessed. Zahn points to something hanging upside down, asking what that weird thing is, and the doctor explains it's their housemate, a specter. Carmilla comments bitterly that she wishes the human had just died already and leaves. Zahn grows a bit concerned, but Xenos reassures him the ghost girl is actually pretty friendly. Zofia bursts out laughing, remarking that this doctor is as brilliant as he is hilarious, and because she liked him so much, she promises to send her subordinates to Xenos for healing, guaranteeing excellent payment in return. Later that same day, Lily prepares tea for her master and receives a gentle pat on the head, but Xenos can't understand why she's prepared 3 cups. The elf is about to explain that their other resident also enjoys some tea when suddenly the specter herself appears out of thin air, blowing softly on her cup to avoid burning her mouth. Honestly, Xenos finds this concern somewhat peculiar coming from the Queen of Specters. Carmilla seizes the opportunity to tell the human to worry about his own life instead. Lily celebrates the clinic's recent influx of new patients since Zofia's visit, although Carmilla finds it boring that nobody has died yet. Just as she says this, she absent-mindedly takes a sip of the hot tea, burns her tongue, and rushes upstairs. The elf wonders aloud why lizard men are constantly injured, and Xenos speculates it's due to the ongoing war between factions in the slums, 3 of which are composed of demi-humans, primarily lizard men and orcs who are perpetually in conflict. The young man was about to reveal the 3rd race involved when suddenly a loud crash outside the clinic interrupts him, prompting him to guess that the final group has just discovered their location. Moments later, the clinic door bursts open, and in storms a dozen aggressive, intimidating humanoid wolves, led by a woman who introduces herself as Linga, leader of the werewolves from the slums. She demands to know if she's speaking to Xenos, the clandestine healer. Xenos recalls that Linga, known as the Tyrant, controls all illegal gambling operations in the underworld, and he finds it oddly fascinating to see what kind of clients he's attracting. Regardless, the doctor politely informs her that clinic hours have ended for the day, unless it's an emergency. Linga responds bluntly that the emergency is Xenos himself. Her gang is locked in a fierce battle against the lizard faction, yet their rivals keep coming back as if their numbers never dwindle. Eventually discovering the involvement of this clandestine healer, she has decided he needs to be eliminated. As she declares this, Linga raises an axe and smashes it into the clinic's floor, cracking the tiles dramatically. Next, she aims a precise, deadly strike at Xenos' neck, but her attack abruptly halts against a magical shield protecting him. Realizing the situation is escalating, Xenos quietly advises Lily to wait in the back. Linga orders her subordinates to attack the healer, but no matter what they attempt, nothing harms him. It's as if he's made of titanium. Frustrated, the werewolf leader orders her pack to destroy the clinic instead. Xenos tries to warn them against this, but no one listens. Suddenly, the Queen of Specters herself descends from upstairs, fully prepared to obliterate the intruders. Surprisingly though, it's Xenos who asks Carmilla to reconsider her actions. After all, the first floor is his responsibility, and besides, it's a place dedicated to saving lives, not ending them. Nevertheless, he thanks her for getting upset on his behalf, leaving the ghost flustered and causing her to quietly retreat. Ultimately, since werewolves are nocturnal creatures fearful of supernatural beings lurking in the dark, Linga quickly surrenders to the healer, mistakenly believing he commands a powerful specter. The following day, an orc enters the clinic and announces that his faction leader, Lady Lo, requests an audience with the clandestine healer. With a weary sigh, Xenos had a hunch this was coming. After dealing with lizards and werewolves, orcs were the obvious next hurdle. By the way, he recalls that their leader is someone significant who made a fortune mining mana stones. It's only been a month since the doctor opened his clinic, and practically every slumlord has already stepped foot in there. Speaking of which, Xenos wonders if the orc leader is a reasonable person, and the warrior assures him that she is as wise as she is honorable. Reflecting on this, Xenos notes that at least Zofia has been leaving expensive gifts at the clinic every day, and Linga is building a veritable palace next door as compensation for the mess she caused. If the orc boss is anything like these two, there shouldn't be much trouble. Xenos queries why the woman hasn't come herself, and the soldier responds that he would never bring the chief to a place where werewolves and lizards are constantly coming and going, especially since she can barely move. Given the gravity of the situation, the underground healer ends up making a personal visit to the patient, being taken to the absolute middle of nowhere, deep within a mana cave, to meet the much-discussed sovereign of that race. Once there, Lo is visibly pleased on her throne by the doctor's presence. He asks how she came to know of his services, and she admits she would have preferred not to know, given how famous his work has become in the slums following his recent services. Naturally, the werewolves and lizards did their best to hide this rare gem, but Loa decided to investigate on her own and finally struck gold. Xenos is annoyed that his clandestine clinic is more famous in the ghetto than the Syrian-Lebanese hospital, while Lo points out that, from what she's heard, the young man can perform any kind of healing if the price is right, and he confirms that working for free is a bit tiring. Anyway, the orc mentions that she can't move from her spot at the moment and would love to know why. Xenos sees that he's being tested in front of everyone, but he has no choice but to examine the case. Then, he scans the patient's body internally, as there are no visible external injuries. Lo has never seen a doctor do this before, and she has no idea how these guys heal people without thoroughly investigating their bodies. By the way, he discovers a lump in her belly and feels the mana surrounding the object. Lo confirms it's a mana stone enchanted with explosion, and with a ridiculously high potency. Xenos asks if someone put it in her food, but she confesses she mistook it for a rice cake and swallowed it. Out of patience, Xenos heads for the exit, assuring that the gang's queen will soon pass this thing, and she doesn't even need to go to the restroom thrown for it. However, Lo explains that it's not so simple, as she chewed the stone partially, and it won't be long until it detonates, and the orc doesn't want to make any sudden movements precisely to avoid provoking this. The other problem is that her men don't want to leave her side, always swearing to die beside the chief for nothing if she goes up in flames. Thus, Xenos questions what she wants him to do, and Lo is willing to donate her wealth to him. If this stone detonates, it'll be the end of the orcs from the slum, and the leader would rather leave her wealth with someone who would make good use of it. Lo has heard that while the healer charges dearly for his service, he examines underprivileged children for free, and she's also a fan of the little ones. With that, the monster tosses a key to the human. He asks if it's been long since Lo ingested this mana stone, and when she confirms, he walks towards her, summons a scalpel, and plunges it into the chief's belly, making the subordinates lose their minds. However, Xenos raises his hand with the stone and leaves everyone dumbfounded. Lo asks what in tarnation just happened, and he informs her that he opened her stomach, removed the object, and then sealed it up completely. Though impressed, Lo warns the doctor to be careful with this explosive, so Xenos wraps the stone with both hands and triggers a detonation that could be heard and felt outside the cave. Despite this, Xenos was without a single scratch. After all, he protected his hands with defensive magic. Of course, it hurt quite a bit, so he had to apply healing. In the end, the man returns the key to the orc, and she simply can't believe that this guy turned down her entire fortune like that. Xenos responds that he only demands payment equivalent to the service provided, and this seems a bit much. Lo bursts out laughing and confesses she liked this madman, so much so that she now considers him the savior of the orc race, and she can count on them for whatever is needed, including 24-hour personal security. Actually, Xenos would prefer if these people didn't do that at all. After surviving the risk of turning to dust, the orc felt a monstrous hunger, so she pulls out 2 rice cakes and offers them to the doctor, but he prefers to eat at home. Speaking of home, a few days later, back at his residence, Xenos notices Lily is a bit down, and she explains that Zofia, Linga, and Lo have been visiting a lot lately. Thinking about it now, the guy agrees, since Zofia shows up on the day of the moon, Linga on the day of water, and Lo on the day of gold, and none of them are injured, sick, or anything like that. So the doctor doesn't understand why they keep coming there. Lily wonders if he can't even guess the reason, so he supposes that the 3 of them have a lot of free time. Lily was about to give her opinion, but Carmilla interrupts to say it's love. Definitely, these women are in love with Xenos. He responds that this is ridiculous, seeing as he's just an unlicensed healer operating outside the law, but the 3-year-old Spectre's eyes don't lie. Whenever she watches from the ceiling, they look at him like women truly smitten. Lily admits she's worried, since the 3 are quite beautiful, and Xenos adds that they are also quite troublesome. Finding it funny, Carmilla assures that it's only a matter of time before the next war between factions is over the kingdom's most delectable healer, so it's good for Lily to choose her weapons soon. For her part, the elf remembers she's too much of a tomboy for that, and doesn't come close to the allure of the others, but the Spectre assures that all 4 smitten maidens are equally beautiful. Xenos can't even laugh at this nonsense, just thinking about how absurd it would be. It turns out he didn't even need to think about it anymore, because the nightmare was about to become reality. Some time later, the first to appear at the clinic is Zofia, the tornado, announcing that she's about to declare war against rival gangs, and wants to know if Xenos is willing to join the lizard men. Following her was Linga, the tyrant. According to her, the time for reckoning had come, and Xenos must join the Lupines for the conflict. Lastly, Lo came to give his message. Thus, a war was set between the 3 factions, with Xenos at the pivot of the chaos, having received generous gifts from each leader to secure his participation. Carmilla jokes that many will die because of the doctor's honey stick, while Lily keeps pouting at every turn. The next day, the fight between the groups begins at noon in an abandoned arena on the outskirts. Accompanied by their soldiers, the 3 leaders meet in the center of the ring. Zofia praises the courage of the other 2 for showing up, knowing they're going to die. Linga finds the joke terrible and promises to show her enemies just how lenient she has been with them from the start. Lastly, Lo ridicules the notion that the opponents think they can face orcs in a mortal combat. In the midst of this, Xenos shouts from the stands to grab everyone's attention. He claims he's not there to stop the fight, since the conflicts between these groups have lasted for years and years, and obviously, there is a lot of resentment built up among everyone. In fact, he only came to say that they should fight until they are satisfied. Lily couldn't be more confused, while the leaders decide that the winner will take the doctor's chastity once the enemies are dead. Without delay, Zofia draws her daggers and nearly hits Linga's neck, who escapes at the last moment, before her head could roll across the arena. Lo launches herself flying at the lizard, who also dodges with skill, sending the orc flying like a bomb onto the gangs. Linga doesn't take it lightly and strikes her attacker with her 2-handed axe, forcing Zofia to block with difficulty. Once again, the brute comes charging with another flying kick, creating a hole in the battlefield, while the lizard leader, after dodging the impact, faces the orc battalion and manages to make some victims along the way. Linga knocks down the lizards in front of her, while Lo crushes the skull of a werewolf who could do nothing to react. From there, the conflict becomes generalized and continues intensely until late afternoon for a good reason. All the combatants agree on one thing: no matter how much they beat and tear at the opponents, they simply don't fall to the ground. Zofia feels her wounds regenerating, until Xenos speaks up again to remind everyone that he didn't come to stop their little scuffle. But since all involved are his patients, he will continue healing each one of them to the end. Realizing that continuing this war is like punching a wall, Zofia sits on the ground feeling foolish for not having realized the situation earlier. Linga has never heard of a healer capable of restoring so many at once, and Lo declares that this fight will never end. Xenos agrees, of course, but not just because of his medical intervention, but because of the infinite feeling of vengeance that crosses generations of each race present and ensures that the conflict will never end, as there are always scores to settle. As such, it's fine for the factions to continue the war, but know that Xenos will charge for each regeneration he performs. Soon, the three leaders burst out laughing and agree that it's not worth giving vent to all this hatred in such a way, so they declare that the war has just ended. Zofia recalls an orc saying, "To offer forgiveness is to have strength." With that, the three clench their fists in the air and decide there's only one fight left worth fighting. Xenos asks what they are talking about, and Lily comments that this guy really is the biggest Chad in the kingdom. Putting that aside, she questions why he intervened in this way, and Xenos shares that he once had a mentor who said, "A healer is third-rate if he only heals wounds, second-rate if he heals and comforts, and first-rate if he makes the world a better place." Interested, the elf wants to know what this mentor was like, and Xenos confesses that she was weird but an impressive person. Because of the mentor, even though he considers himself a third-rate healer, Xenos wants to make the slum a better place. Or at least that's the speech he's going to adopt, because if no one else from the slum gets hurt, the doctor will lose his job. After noting that the guy is a real smart aleck, Lily also points out that she likes the guy. He responds the same, but she gets pissed because he didn't understand the tone of her phrase, even though she doesn't want to explain what exactly she meant. Be that as it may, Xenos, who is no fool, announces that it's time to charge for the consultation and head home. The next day, the commander of the division of the Kingdom of Herzith calls the Vice Commander Krishna after hearing worrying rumors about a territorial conflict among the semi-humans in the slums. Although it's a many-year-old dispute that everyone knows well, the kingdom can no longer allow it to run freely, as Herzith has thrived under its strict hierarchy system, with royalty at the top. The citizens take out their frustration on the poor, who in turn take it out on each other, and this is what maintains the balance of this society, according to the commander. What scares him is the possibility of the poor uniting, as that would be a threat to the aristocracy, the ruling class. The king is like the sun to the people, and it is the duty of the Order of Knights to defend the capital where their ruler resides. Krishna doesn't understand where the commander is getting the idea that there is a peacemaker among the factions, because they have always deeply hated each other and will never unite. There is not a single being capable of getting between the tornado, the tyrant, and the mighty. About this, the commander agrees, but this goes against the rumor he heard. Apparently, there really is a peacemaker among the gangs, who was able to mediate the three and pacify the conflict, risking even a supposed union among them. Whether it's just a poorly told story or not, the army can't ignore this, so it's Krishna's mission, the Iron Rose, to arrest the rebel who threatens to unite the poor against the ruling class. In the meantime, Xenos sneezes for the 10th time in 30 seconds, starting to worry Lily. The gang leaders, for their part, take advantage of the poor man's illness to satisfy their deepest desires, offering the warmth the doctor deserves with their own bodies. Trying to maintain professionalism, Xenos finishes treating Zofia, and Lily notes that it had been a while since the lizard woman needed treatment. Zofia jokes about nearly signing up for the house's health plan due to her frequent visits, and the healer reminds her that this isn't a club because the woman comes even when there's no problem to solve. In fact, Tornado mentions that she had a fight yesterday with soldiers from the Order, as they are keeping an eye on the gang. Xenos recalls that the first time he treated the caterpillar, she and her brother were also injured by soldiers, and she confirms they were caught when they tried to sneak into an aristocrat's mansion to borrow some items. Speaking of which, Zond remembers there was a crazy woman shooting with that magical flame weapon, the deputy commander known as Iron Rose, who always opens a portal to hell during her appearances and maintains an expression of indifference on her face while the flames scorch the earth. Carmilla smiles, imagining the mess that would ensue if all the fiery women of this kingdom suddenly clashed all at once. Xenos thinks he's free of this worry. After all, the Royal Knights wouldn't go after a clandestine healer working in a pigsty. But the persistent specter of Carmilla assures him that's not quite the case. Ignoring the warnings, the doctor invites Lily to lunch. Then the three gangsters butt in uninvited. Zofia wants salad, while Linga wants fish, and Loa wants meat. In turn, Xenos makes it clear that nobody asked them. But the truth is he no longer had any control over his own clinic, which was decidedly dominated by the kingdom's most dangerous criminals. During the meal, before going upstairs for a nap, Carmilla reminds Zenos that he is the only one in the kingdom capable of keeping those three in line, and the young man feels like a beast tamer with this information. In the slums, races that were once sworn enemies began to live together in harmony, and Krishna can hardly believe it when she arrives on the hill and sees the friendly atmosphere. She approaches a random lizard and notes that his race seems to be getting along well with the werewolves and orcs, and the man replies that they aren't so bad once you get to know them slowly. The officer asks what happened to the war between the races. Then the lizard realizes he can't go any further and walks away, emphasizing that he doesn't want to draw attention. From there, Krishna loses her temper and points her pistol at the lizard's belly, but he still refuses to answer, as they all owe a lot to that man. In the midst of this, the lizard sees Zofia and Zond passing by, then shouts the names of the bosses. Quickly, Krishna leaves there to avoid trouble within enemy territory. Upon seeing the lizard leaders, she remembers that the siblings should have been missing an arm, but they regenerated as if by miracle. In search of answers and direction, as she got lost in the outskirts of the slum, the deputy commander reaches Zeno's clinic and asks how to get back to the city. At that moment, Lily appears, and the human realizes she is facing an elf, then points her gun at Zeno's and fires a projectile that emits a purple cloud at the healer. Frankly, the officer hadn't expected to encounter another target in such a place, as she was working a different case while also investigating a series of child kidnappings. Noticing that the elf and the human weren't related, Krishna immediately became suspicious and decided to act. Lily tried to explain to the woman that she had been taken in by Xenos, not abducted, but the human insisted that human trafficking was illegal unless conducted through proper channels. Then, Lily made it clear that the boy had saved her, which made the deputy commander realize she had made a mistake. But regardless, the ammunition she had fired wasn't lethal, though the healer would still be out for a while. After all, she's a perfectionist at her job, but her only flaw is her short fuse. Out of nowhere, Xenos himself, now awake, corrected her, saying that her only flaw was actually her terrible sense of direction. Surprised by the situation, the officer apologized for acting rashly, but wanted to understand how the boy was unharmed. Xenos explained that he had simply used defensive magic, which Krishna didn't understand, as it shouldn't have been enough to stop her magical weapons. With that, she approached the man and verified that he indeed had no injuries, commenting that these days, many unusual things happen. For his part, Xenos replied that getting shot by someone he'd never met fell into that category for him. Krishna then asked if the young man was some sort of renowned sorcerer who had dedicated his life to defensive arts from an early age and had mastered this field of study to be known as the one who worked hard for defensive magic. First of all, Xenos said she was wrong. Second, he stated that she was terrible with names. The thing is, you might fool others, but Krishna assured that no one could fool the deputy commander of the Royal Knights Order. Hearing the woman's important title, Xenos and Lily were astounded, while Krishna demanded that the young man cooperate with the investigation. Given the gravity of the situation, Xenos hung a flag from the ceiling to signal that no one should approach the clinic, then sat down with Krishna to see what she really wanted. The officer revealed that she was in the slums on a secret mission to locate and arrest an individual. Xenos found it curious that the woman was disclosing all this, given that the mission was supposed to be secret, but she replied that it was every citizen's duty to cooperate with the Order of Knights. Since that was the case, he asked whom she was looking for, and she whispered, "The mediator, the one who had settled the disputes among the factions in the slums." Xenos spat out his tea the moment he heard this, while Carmilla appeared with that look that spelled trouble. As a defender of order, Krishna could not ignore someone who held such power, but she assured that she hadn't taken anything from the semi-humans, even after threatening them. Since this person seemed to have a good handle on controlling these races, the woman had no doubts that he was a servant of the devil. Xenos argued that perhaps the guy just didn't want to stand out, and that leaving him be might be the best option. Krishna then asked if he knew the mediator, but Xenos replied that it was just his intuition talking. The problem, according to the officer, was that allowing someone like that to act of their own volition could pose a threat to the entire nation in the future. Lily didn't believe the mediator was thinking on such a scale, as even though he was strict about money, She bet he didn't like to see people getting hurt. From what the elf had said, Krishna asked if she knew the wanted person, but the little one desperately replied that she didn't. Either way, Krishna had already figured it would be difficult to track the suspect's trail, indicating that their conversation had come to an end. Xenos then committed to showing the way to town, and even though the woman noted that this guy seemed very eager for her to leave, she decided to get up to depart. On her way out, she questioned why there was a bed in the middle of the room, and Xenos lied that he had been thinking of throwing it out, so he had left it there. With that, the deputy commander asked if she could use the bed to sleep, as she needed to find a base of operations for her mission, and believed this place was perfect, making it clear she would pay for her stay. Following this, Carmilla emerged from behind and quietly commented that the owner of the clinic was ready to take in yet another dangerous woman into his life. Later, Krishna was welcomed more calmly, so Lily served her a hot drink. Unable to drink it, the fighter admitted that her only flaw was her sensitivity to high-temperature beverages, prompting Xenos to tally yet another only flaw this person claimed to have. Amid this, Lily looked displeased and told the doctor to give her a lap and do the usual. After the initial shock, the boy understood what she wanted and began to stroke the elf's head. Carmilla reappeared to make it clear that the little one was jealous, and Krishna was confused to see that the young man was talking to no one behind him, as the specter was invisible. Carmilla explained that Lily was trying to show off in front of the stranger who had appeared, unwilling to accept the arrogant one who had shot Xenos without reason with a magical weapon. Either way, the ghost could hardly wait for the next chapters of this drama, as this plot was sure to catch fire. Speaking of Lily, she noticed that her friend's tea was still hot and warned she would blow on it for him. She then offered to comb his hair and put an apple in the boy's mouth. Seeing that Krishna wasn't bothered by this, the elf decided to use the secret weapon Carmilla had taught her, then grabbed Xenos' face and began to say she wouldn't let him sleep tonight. However, before she could finish what she wanted to say, the poor girl passed out on the spot and was laid down to rest on the bed. Now alone with Xenos, Krishna recalls that, according to him, the elf was captured by slave traders, so she wants to know who they are. Xenos confesses he has no idea, and the officer notes that there is a hub of illegal child trade in this area. The man asks if that's why he was shot, and the woman apologizes once more, emphasizing that her only flaw is her short temper. Despite this, she still needs to be perfect for the royal guard, like a heroine of the people, so one fault is passable. Believing Xenos to be a defense mage, she wonders if he could fully regenerate an arm if he mastered healing spells as he does defense ones. Xenos was about to answer, but the officer cuts him off, stating that only a saint or a high-level secret healer could accomplish that. Krishna says this because she caused that kind of damage to Zofia, the tornado, in a fight, but when she saw her in the slum with her henchmen, her arm was intact. Therefore, she believes that someone capable of such regeneration would definitely have enough respect to be listened to in the community. Anyway, the officer promises to start her real investigation tomorrow and vows to arrest this agitator. Xenos asks why the woman feels so threatened by the slums, then Krishna reveals that her mother was killed by someone living there. Her mother was a deeply kind person who visited the slums daily to feed the hungry. When she was killed, they said it happened when her wedding ring was stolen. Although she saved many from hunger, in her final moment, there was no one to save her. For this reason, Krishna decided to become an invincible heroine who would bring justice to criminals and prevent this from happening to anyone else. With this in mind, she became the youngest deputy commander in the history of the Royal Knights, and her track record at the institution earned her the nickname Iron Rose. Many use this nickname to accuse the woman of being too harsh, but the truth is different. Her face, according to her, is like an iron mask, as she has found it difficult to smile since her mother died. The next day, Xenos attends to Zofia, after Krishna had said she would only return in the evening. Carmilla comments that the officer's story is not so uncommon, for when you live 300 years, you are sure to see many cases where a person's life was turned upside down for various reasons. That said, she asks about the flag, and the clinic owner believes he will take it down from the ceiling for now. Then, while he was healing the tornado, she was going to mention that one of her subordinates saw an officer of the Royal Knights, but as soon as she says this, Krishna herself suddenly appears in the clinic. Immediately, the two draw their weapons and take up combat positions. Carmilla notes that Xenos looks like a husband caught cheating, while Lily shouts that Zofia just got lost and ended up there. Zofia takes the opportunity to confirm the elf's version. Then Krishna asks what happened to the caterpillar's arm, believing it was the mediator who healed it, this element that gathers criminals to threaten the residents of the community. In a mocking manner, Zofia teaches the knight that she can also find criminals in all social classes. Moreover, since she investigates child trafficking, she should know that the scheme's boss is an aristocrat. Krishna replies that the network of this illegal trade is concentrated in the slum. Then the caterpillar tells her that it is to prevent the trails from reaching Calendar, the real culprit. The deputy commander does not believe it, as Calendar is a philanthropist passionate about educating orphans, but the tornado did not expect that this human would care about what she said. Anyway, it's clear that Krishna's mistake is being deceived by appearances, and she reveals that the mediator is the opposite of that, having never judged the people of the slums for who they are, and just saves those who really need it. As much as she hates to admit it, Zofia is sure he would save the deputy commander too, because unlike her, he does not have this ridiculous sense of justice that thinks all evil comes from the slum. That said, Xenos steps in front of Krishna's gun and confesses that Zofia is his patient, as he is the mediator. The woman doubts it, as the mediator is a master of healing magic, while the boy's specialty is defensive magic, and it's impossible to master two different schools at such a high level. Xenos explains that he is not a master in either, but that the two are quite similar in essence. Krishna still does not believe it, but as Xenos has shown support for the semi-humans and the mediator, she decides to base herself elsewhere, as she cannot tarnish her reputation as a perfect heroine alongside people like these. Then, she goes to Lord Calendar and highlights that there has been a lot of activity from thieving lizards in this area lately, and her intention is to increase local security, so it would be good if Calendar and his noble colleagues were more cautious. As part of this, the officer wishes to conduct a security assessment at the Lord's mansion. Calendar sees no problem, but confesses that he would like to be notified beforehand, but Krishna assures him that a surprise inspection would be more effective in checking the usual level of security. Thus, the deputy commander gains permission to start her analysis, and reflects that Calendar was pointed out by the tornado as being the leader of the illegal child trade, but she feels she is wasting her time there. Soon after conducting this inspection, she reveals that the man's security is quite strict, but if she had to point out a flaw in it, it would be the distribution. Calendar asks what that means, then the woman evades the question and asks to use the bathroom before leaving. On her way there, she ponders that Calendar is somewhere in the upper middle echelon of the aristocracy, so it's strange the size of his guard. Additionally, there is the distribution of soldiers around the mansion, as there are far more guards at the back than at the front entrance. Thinking about this, Krishna takes a look at the back of the residence and finds a redoubt with a staircase leading underground, then descends into that dark place until she finds children locked in a chain. She assures them that she is the heroine who will save these children, until she is hit by a shot in her back. In a dramatic turn, Calendar appears with a magical pistol and remarks that the Royal Knight's weapons are quite powerful, perfect for intimidating children. With that, he fires at Krishna again, teaching the officer that her job is to stay quiet and keep the poor in line. At this moment, Iron Rose asks the children for forgiveness, as it seems she won't be able to get them out of there. In her final moments, she thinks of her mother and how she failed to be the heroine she had promised. However, Zofia arrives alongside Xenos, and the doctor jests that this house call is going to cost quite a bit. The Lord questions who these people are, but Xenos assures him that he's just an ordinary healer, and Zofia explains that she merely showed the way to this guy. Knowing no one would complain if he killed a lizard woman from the slums, Calendar orders Tornado to lie down. But as Xenos lets out a mocking sigh, the Lord shoots him and bursts into laughter. However, the healer's defensive magic protects him from the impact, allowing him to gradually approach and send the shooter into a panic. When one pistol runs out of ammo, the noble draws another, but ends up tripping over himself and falls dead to the ground. Xenos picks up the pistol that was tossed near him and points it at the Lord, who questions how an inferior being dares to do this to a noble. Xenos replies that if you're going to shoot at people, you should be prepared to take a bullet yourself. Seeing that this guy means business, Calendar offers whatever it takes to be spared. Xenos admits he holds no grudge against this man, having just met him, but he was really annoyed that he shot at him. Calendar begs for forgiveness as if his noble status made his apology worth more than usual, which only makes the healer more impatient, making it clear that there's someone else the man really should be apologizing to. Since Calendar doesn't get it, Xenos shoots the noble for having kidnapped his future clients. The bullet creates a repulsive effect, merely tossing the target and tearing his clothes in a humiliating manner, and the limiter that the shooter activated ensures the shot isn't lethal. After all, Xenos believes it's not his duty to judge this criminal. Meanwhile, Krishna is certain this is her end and asks the boy to report everything that happened to the Order of the Royal Knights. Having said that, Xenos confesses it's rather embarrassing to see Iron Rose give up like this, and while healing the woman, he tells her not to be shocked when the bill for the consultation arrives at her house. Astonished by the man's ability, Krishna emotionally highlights that he is a hero, but he replies that he's just an underground healer with a rundown clinic. After being healed, she laments that she isn't the perfect heroine she thought she was, and Xenos tells her that there's no such thing as perfection, as people who fight for something will get hurt, one way or another. Then, when that happens, it's Xenos' job to make sure they don't die. Nevertheless, he points out that Krishna is a heroine to certain people there. When the woman realizes this, the children ask if the heroine is still there, and this moves her. Iron Rose thought her mother was just a poor victim, but her eyes always sparkled when she fed the street children. Indeed, she was a heroine to those boys, even if she was clumsy, forgetful, and irritable at times. Despite her many flaws, Krishna's mother was her daughter's heroine. Later, Zophia's subordinates remove the children from the underground, and she leaves with Xenos before the royal guard arrives. Before leaving, Krishna asks why the doctor came to save her, and he confesses that he did it because the lady wouldn't be able to pay her bill if she were dead. Hearing this, the officer laughs as she hadn't in a long time, acknowledging that this difficulty is one of her many flaws. The next day, Xenos and Lily head out to buy a new kind of tea, both excited to try the drink. Years ago, on those very same streets, Xenos was just another homeless man among the many scattered throughout the city. One day, while wandering around, Astan came across the healer sitting with his head down at a street corner and invited him to join his party. After all, the guy probably didn't even have a place to sleep. Xenos didn't believe someone from the slums could ever become an adventurer, and Astan admitted that, yeah, usually they couldn't. But if you've got the drive and the talent, where you come from doesn't matter. Xenos mentioned he knew a bit of healing magic, but Astan was skeptical after all. Healing arts required serious study, something a slum dweller could never manage. Even so, he kept the offer open and reached out his hand, not because he believed in Xenos, but because he needed a free servant, and he made that perfectly clear. Sometime later, they were on another mission together when they ran into a wolf. The warrior got slashed across the arm, and Xenos quickly healed the wound. Even then, after defeating the beast, the party leader decided Xenos was useless dead weight. That same day, he was kicked out in the most humiliating way. Back to the present, the Golden Phoenix has a new member now. As they head toward a dungeon, Astan grumbles that the place is way too far. Sure, it's a chance to impress the 7 great nobles, but it feels like a waste of energy. One teammate admits he's still hungover, and the archer just wants to finish the job and get back to drinking. The mage thinks that's a great idea, especially since that waitress's eyes lit up when they told her they were part of the Golden Phoenix. Astan finds it amusing that their flawless monster-slaying reputation has reached even this remote place. Speaking of monsters, the first wave appears ahead. The leader draws his sword and announces it's time to gather some pelts for Lord Fennel. He tells Guile to cast a defensive spell, and Guile activates Encapsulate, a barrier spell that coats the body in a protective shield. Dodging the monster's first lunge, Astan is confident he'd never be hit by such a weak creature. But right after, he suffers a severe burn on his arm. Things only get worse when the archer takes a bite to the neck. Astan immediately yells for Andres to launch a spell, but the mage is frozen with fear and can't act. Meanwhile, Guile's shield spell isn't working properly, probably because of the hangover. With no other choice, Astan orders a retreat. After the escape, he demands to know how his team struggled against mere B+ rank monsters. Andres fires back, saying the leader didn't exactly shine in the fight either. Guile then asks if Xenos' healing was actually fake, and Astan insists it was. Still, maybe it's time to hire a real healer, not a worthless peasant like that one. Soon after, they bring on a healer named Ammon. But she's quick to temper expectations. She mostly works in the capital and has no experience in real combat. In fact, she's not even sure why a famous group like the Golden Phoenix would want someone as average as her. Astan simply replies that they've got their issues. Guile asks whether Yuma, the archer, will be okay. Yuma says he'll probably survive, but won't be adventuring again anytime soon. Astan takes this as proof the guy didn't belong in the team anyway, and that losing an archer won't make a difference. The mission will continue. Lord Fennel wants a scarf made of firefox fur for his daughter's birthday, and Astan won't pass up a chance to impress a noble. And so, the group enters the cave. The leader draws his Humber blade, promising to slice the foxes into pieces. Just as he finishes speaking, a fireball flies at them, one he's forced to deflect with his sword. The foxes had set an ambush and were now charging at full speed. Astan orders Guile to cast a shield, then rushes toward one of the beasts, starting a fierce duel. After deflecting another fireball, a splintered flame hits Andres in the stomach, knocking him out of the fight. But worst of all, even the strongest warrior in the party, Astan himself, can't land a single hit. It's like his body has suddenly become sluggish and unresponsive. Yuma warns that Andres will die without proper healing. Guile panics and asks what they're supposed to do now. With fire and chaos all around, Astan feels a crushing pressure closing in from every side, and decides to retreat once more. Outside the dungeon, Astan lashes out at Guile for failing to cast the buff again. But Yuma argues that the shield spell did work, otherwise the mage would have died on the spot. The leader demands that the healer fix the problem, but she explains she needs to tailor the spell to the nature of the wound. She did all she could, but Andres needs to be taken to a hospital with fully equipped healing circles. Astan says there's no time and tells her to figure it out, but she insists that not even top-level healers could do anything in these conditions, maybe a saint or elite magic users. Right then, Astan finds himself wondering if their troubles began the moment he kicked out Xenos. Though he still refuses to believe a useless peasant like that could have actually been any good. Days later, after Lord Fennel's daughter's birthday had already passed, the Golden Phoenix visited the noble's estate without the fox pelts. Astan wasn't even received by Fennel himself. Instead, a steward met them, saying he felt foolish for ever placing hope in this adventuring team. After all, the Lord was left embarrassed, having nothing to give his daughter at her party. Astan could have just admitted that he wasn't going to make the deadline, but, true to his cowardly nature, he lied, blaming it all on a supposed betrayal by a former teammate named Xenos. Then he remembered he'd taken care not to record anything about Xenos' time in the group. He didn't want some slum rat appearing on the team's official records. So, he let the subject drop and asked for another chance, promising to recruit members who could actually get the job done. After landing another opportunity, the team leader sets out to find Xenos, thinking the guy must be desperate to rejoin the Golden Phoenix. As much as he hates to admit it, deep down he knows it was that healer who kept things together. Back when Xenos was part of the crew, things actually ran smoothly, so maybe, just maybe, this is his shot to get the group back on track. Wasting no time, he and Guile head straight for the slums, only to find the three races living in peace, something he never thought he'd see. Since he once gave Xenos a gold coin as compensation, he figures the guy must have returned to the outskirts. So, he hires the three demi-human bosses to help track him down. First up, he visits the lizardfolk leader, but Zophia's quick to say she's got more important things to do, like checking in with the doctor. Astan catches himself thinking how stunning she is, and how, once he becomes a noble, he could add her to his collection. But anyway, he lays out his real purpose. He's looking for a man named Xenos. The tornado bursts into a loud, echoing laugh after all. She's staring straight at the fools who kicked the doctor out of their team. And just to rub it in, she points out how ridiculous Astan looks. That sets him off, and his hand moves toward his sword, Humber. Instantly, all of Zophia's underlings are ready to pounce. She tells them to get lost. Xenos has far better things to do than listen to two sorry losers. Astan snaps back, demanding to know if she realizes who he is. She fires the question right back at him, and for a moment, his whole body tenses up. Next, they go to see the leader of the werewolves. The moment she finds out they're the ones who cast Xenos aside, Linga says they should both die and come back as dung beetles. Once again, Astan tries to throw his weight around, but she calmly reminds him she could rip his head off in under a second. Lastly, they pay a visit to the orc commander. Right off the bat, she makes it clear she knows exactly who they are. With nothing left to say, Astan turns to leave, but Loa warns him. If she ever finds out he laid a finger on Xenos, the orcs won't be sitting around twiddling their thumbs. After 3 failed attempts, Astan just can't wrap his head around it. Xenos is respected by every leader in the slums. His mind's still trying to convince him it must be someone else with the same name. But speak of the devil, Guile spots the healer himself walking down the street beside Lily. Without missing a beat, they go after him. As they approach, the leader of the Phoenix makes a snide remark, saying it's a miracle Xenos is still alive. But Xenos clearly isn't in the mood and asks what they want. Astan plays coy, asking what he thinks they want, but Xenos isn't up for riddles and turns to walk away. Realizing the situation's slipping out of his hands, Astan tries to throw him a bone, says Xenos should feel lucky. He's being offered the chance to come back to the Golden Phoenix. Xenos immediately shuts that down. But seeing Astan push so hard, he throws out a deal. He's willing to tag along occasionally, but only if the pay is right. 50,000 Wen per heal, $1 million for serious injuries, and triple that if they need any buffs or defensive magic. No discounts. Astan snaps, yelling that the so-called healer probably doesn't even have a proper roof over his head in this dump. Right then, a lizard folk on the street thanks the doctor for treating his leg. Suddenly, a small crowd gathers around, each person showing their gratitude for everything Xenos does for the community. Once the group disperses, Astan makes one last push, claiming he came here personally to grant Xenos permission to rejoin the team. But Xenos just shakes his head. Too late, he says. I'm not interested. Feeling humiliated, Astan draws his sword and charges, but before he can reach him, a shot rings out. Krishna shoots him down. As a law enforcement officer, she can't just ignore an attempted crime. But she's not there for justice, she's there to see Xenos. Turns out, she got lost on her way to his clinic and just happened to find him by chance. Stunned, Astan realizes he's standing in front of the youngest vice commander in Royal Knight history, and even she seems close to Xenos. As he stumbles to his feet, Krishna announces that she's taking him in for attempted assault. Predictably, Astan blames Guile for making him do it, then turns tail and runs. Later that night, in the underground clinic, the demi-human leaders meet with the doctor to talk about the men they encountered. Zofia says she got a bad feeling and sent her men after them, but they lost the trail. Linga did the same, and even her werewolves couldn't pick up a scent. Lo admits the two managed to avoid the orcs' entire net. With no one sure what Astan might try next, there's real concern that he'll turn to the Underground Guild, a gang that lives deep in the shadows, untouched even by the demi-humans. These are people who'll do anything, for the right price. Then again, Xenos doesn't believe Astan has the kind of money to hire them. Carmilla agrees if he was chasing after Xenos thinking he'd work for peanuts. He's clearly broke. Still, Zofia heard there's someone in that guild who takes on jobs under certain conditions, even without a cash payment. They call him the Guide. Later that night, Lily finds Xenos awake and restless. Worried that he hasn't been sleeping, she offers him some tea to help him unwind. After one sip, he compliments the flavor, like he always does, and it makes her light up. When she has trouble sleeping, he gently runs his fingers through her hair. She returns the gesture with a smile, and he promises he'll sleep like a baby after that. A few minutes later, it's Lily who's fast asleep. Xenos tucks her into bed, then heads back to his armchair where Carmilla's now waiting, helping herself to the third of the 3 cups served. She asks if seeing his old team again is what's keeping him up. Xenos teases her for being such a caring ghost. She plays it cool, but the awkward way she reacts just makes it even more obvious she really does care. She said it was too much tea to drink alone, so she decided to help Xenos, and he thanked her for the company. To be honest, he had already forgotten about Astan and Guile, but when a few memories of what they'd done resurfaced, the doctor regretted not having beaten them up when he had the chance. Carmilla asked how it was even possible for Xenos to learn healing in the slums. He explained that, one day, he'd been trying to revive a corpse. Yes, he knew it was forbidden sorcery, but he had no idea at the time, since he was just a kid. His mentor even smacked him on the head for messing with that kind of thing. The Spectre knew it wasn't quite the same, But when she was alive, there was something called artificial life sorcery used to create golems. Xenos mentioned that was 300 years ago, back during the Human-Demon War, when the Demon Lord was still around. According to Carmilla, it was a lost form of demonic magic that used a special magic stone as the core, mixing in carbon and sulfur to create the golem. Golems felt no fear, no exhaustion, they were true war machines. By the way, Xenos was curious what had the ghost been doing 300 years ago, but she admitted she'd forgotten. After all, it had been a long, long time. Suddenly, the two of them heard and felt a massive rumble coming from the slums. Carmilla flew into the sky to get a better view of what had happened, and couldn't believe her eyes. A golem was tearing through part of the outskirts. We then rewind the clock a bit back to the shadowy underground sector of the city, where a mysterious man who calls himself the Guide offers his services for a certain type of job. Even though the payment isn't quite what he expected, he agrees nonetheless. According to him, money isn't everything. Soon after, the same man meets someone seeking revenge not just against one specific person, but against everyone connected to them. The Guide, ever curious, asks why. He reminds the client that folks from the underground guild aren't picky so long as they're paid, but information like this always comes with value. At first, the man hesitates, refusing to explain his motives. But when he sees the Guide start to walk away, he gives in, realizing the deal won't go forward without answers. What he reveals is less a plan for justice and more a desperate, selfish attempt to unload his frustrations onto someone else. The Guide laughs, entertained by how pitifully ego-driven this whole thing is. Still, he agrees to help. He's been working on a magical stone for some time now, and this is the perfect chance to put it to the test. We cut back to the present. A golem rampages through the slums, sending the population into a panic as people flee for their lives. Unable to contain her curiosity, Carmilla appears at Xenos' side, questioning how such an ancient relic could be wreaking havoc here of all places. Xenos asks about Lily. Carmilla explains the child is asleep. If she saw this monstrous thing, the nightmares would be unbearable. Just then, the three leaders of the slum factions arrive, having heard the destruction echoing through their territory. Though they made it out unharmed, many of Linga's werewolves lie injured, unable to move, and nearly half of Loa's orcs are gravely wounded. Xenos tells them what they're facing is likely a form of ancient surface-dwelling life. What he wants to know now is, where did this thing come from? Lo isn't sure, but one of her orcs swears he saw the monster emerging from within the slums. Xenos immediately suspects a connection to the underground guild. But with the threat knocking at their door, there's no time to dwell on it. He shifts to action, ordering the three leaders to gather the wounded in one place for immediate treatment. Elsewhere, perched behind the front lines and peering through a spyglass, the Guide watches the chaos unfold. The golem, he notes, is just as destructive as he had hoped, though perhaps a bit slow. There's certainly room for improvement, but for now, it's enough to get the job done. What really interests him is how Xenos will react when the people he loves begin to fall one by one. This is only the first act, after all, and the Guide couldn't be more excited to see how it plays out. Back amid the burning slums, everyone who's still on their feet rushes to help the injured. Thanks to the rare alliance between the three rival gangs, all those in critical condition are brought to a central spot where Xenos can cast High Heal and recover them all in one go. Once that's done, he orders everyone who's been healed to evacuate immediately. Carmilla raises an eyebrow, wondering why he's so grumpy. He grumbles that it's not exactly ideal being woken up in the middle of the night to save hundreds of lives without any guarantee of compensation. One thing's for sure, the good doctor has no intention of letting whoever did this get away with making him work for free. Meanwhile, the Guide continues watching. He's surprised. Xenos, this so-called healer, might be even more skilled than someone of elite rank. Still, what's the point of healing all those people if the source of their injuries is still out there, tearing through everything? The Guide shrugs. The enemies won the first act. Now, it's time to prepare for the second. For now, with no more wounded left to treat and the golem taking a brief pause, the defenders get a moment to breathe, especially Xenos, who looks like he's had enough and would much rather be in bed. Unfortunately, the monster is still wandering through the slums, which means it's far from finished, no matter how much the doctor might wish otherwise. Carmilla reminds him, there's zero chance the golem just gives up. These things follow their master's orders until the job is done. And based on how it's moving, she bets the command was something along the lines of reduce the slums to ruins. Xenos buries his face in his hands. He's exhausted and overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Carmilla ponders how someone even got their hands on a high-purity magic stone, the kind used as a golem's core. As far as anyone knows, those only exist on the southern continent, in the ruins of the Demon Lord's castle. Not to mention, all such stones were supposedly used up during the Human-Demon War, and the knowledge to craft dark magic systems was lost ages ago. Even the remaining materials are nearly impossible to find. Once again, Xenos is done speculating. He wants to end this now. He rises to go after the towering creature himself. Zofia, Linga, and Lo offer to fight by his side. It is, after all, their home that's being torn apart. To bring the golem down, Carmilla explains, they'll have to destroy the magic stone hidden somewhere inside its body. It's the monster's core, its heart. Without destroying it, the golem will just keep regenerating, making it unbeatable. Xeno sighs. That means they won't be able to salvage the stone and sell it, but it might be their only option. He tells the others to start the attack, he'll stay in the back, providing support. Trusting in the legendary doctor of the slums, the three leaders charge forward. Instantly, they receive buffs boosts to their speed, strength, and impact. With that, their attacks become swift and precise. But then, the golem takes a hit, recovers almost instantly, and lands a massive blow on Linga, sending her flying through half a dozen homes before crashing into the rubble. Amazingly, she's fine thanks to the healer's powerful reinforcement spells. Speaking of him, it's time for Xenos to take action. It's been a long time since he's been in a battle like this, so he needs to focus on two important things. First, the farther away he is, the less effective his spells become, so he needs to keep a certain distance to maintain their potency. Second, while healing, defense, and buffs may seem similar, each one activates differently, so he can't just cast them all at once. Xenos has to protect his allies until they're ready to attack, then boost their abilities, and only after that heal any injuries they might have suffered in the process. When the golem regenerates its hand once again after taking damage, Xenos thinks he knows what to do. He's realized that it takes the monster some time to recover any lost body parts, so he tells his teammates to target its legs. When they do, the creature begins to collapse. But just as it's falling, Zofia notices a child standing directly below about to be crushed. Xenos runs toward the girl, but there's no time to save her. And yet, somehow, the golem adjusts its fall just enough to avoid hitting her, sparing her life. Seeing this, the guide admits that this enemy is full of surprises. In fact, it's clear that the golem has now passed the second act, but what comes next is the beginning of the third and most important one. The true climax, where a final and crucial decision awaits the so-called hero from the slums. Back in the favela, Carmilla points out that golems are only supposed to follow simple commands and shouldn't be capable of what this one just did. Xenos suspects someone used an imperfect magic stone on the creature, especially since the healer just scanned the golem's remains and discovered that Astan himself is inside. Turns out, just a few hours earlier, Astan had gone to see the guide to pursue his revenge no matter what it cost. He was ready to go to the very end for his ultimate goal. The guide watches as Xenos finally understands, the best way to bring life to an imperfect magic stone is to combine it with a living human. The fusion between the stone and a person creates a new type of core. But humans, with their complex emotions, are difficult to control. That's why you need a simpler element, one overflowing with intense negative feelings. The guide had told Astan that the stone was necessary for his revenge, and once it was implanted, the golem was born from the fusion. Now, the guide is eager to see how Xenos will end this fight, because destroying the stone also means killing someone from his old group. The very man who helped him escape the slums. Xenos takes a deep breath and tells the girls to back off. He has to deal with this in his own way now. They protest, saying a healer like him can't take the front line alone. He agrees that would be the smart decision, especially since avoiding the front lines was the 7th lesson his mentor always drilled into him. If you're too busy fighting, you lose focus on supporting your allies. But considering the way things are now, the doctor decides it's something he needs to handle alone. Just like the other leaders, Carmilla realizes it's almost dawn and decides to head home too. She's not much of a fan of the sun anyway. Still, she promises to have tea ready when the doctor returns. Zenos jokes that she'll just leave the tea making to Lily, and the ghost rolls her shoulders in frustration at how easily she got caught. Now alone, facing his rival, Zenos remembers when Astan came to him in this very same place, the slums, where it all began. Setting that aside, it was shocking to see someone as selfish as him save a child. Zenos once heard Guile say that the reason Astan craved money and power was because his younger sister had died. She couldn't afford the medicine she needed. Maybe that child reminded him of her. In the end, there might still be a trace of humanity left in that stone armor. Even if the hate remains, even after Zenos finally got a place of his own, only to be abandoned by Astan later. He always wondered how Astan knew he had nowhere to go back then, and now he understands it's because Astan didn't either. But none of that matters now. Dodging a crushing blow from the golem, Zenos uses his magic scalpel to slash off the creature's arms and strike at its chest, piercing deep enough to tear a hole through its core. With that, Astan is fully exposed before his former comrade. Not that Zenos feels any joy about it, but at least this will be the last time they'll ever have to face each other. Without hesitation, the healer cuts open the man's chest with his scalpel and declares it's time for their adventure to end. The guide, watching closely, is surprised by the enemy's response. Zenos killed Astan with far less hesitation than expected. But given the apparent abuse he suffered at the hands of that lunatic, maybe it wasn't such an unreasonable decision after all. Either way, the game is over, and it wasn't quite as thrilling as the guide had hoped. But there's no use crying over spilled milk. Still, the guide keeps looking through the telescope and notices the story isn't quite over yet. Instead of just injuring his former ally, Zenos is healing him with every blow, cutting away the parts fused with the magic stone and healing what remains. He knows that if he cuts too deep, Astan will die, but if he hesitates too long, the magic stone will fuse again with the newly healed body. Amazed, the guide notes that the healer is still maintaining such focus and precision even after saving so many people in the middle of a brutal battle. Zenos, in turn, knows the world would probably be better off without this guy. But since he made the choice to let him live, the least the bastard can do is pay the bill for the treatment, especially now that Zenos is broke. Astan asks why he was spared, and the doctor gives him a few reasons. First, before dying, Astan would need to reveal who was really behind all of this. Second, despite being absolute human garbage, he did a few things that ended up benefiting Zenos' life. He pulled him out of the slums and later gave him compensation, albeit out of arrogance. But that single gold coin? It was what Zenos used to save Lily and start his underground clinic. Still, the biggest reason is simple. Zenos just can't bring himself to end it. After all, he's a healer. With that, the doctor plunges his scalpel into the golem's chest, striking the magical core. Instantly, a blinding beam of light bursts from the creature's body. Once he's saved, Astan, visibly ashamed, admits that Zenos really is something else. Even after everything, the healer still chose to let him live. So he asks, "Is this your revenge?" But Zenos never thought that far ahead, he just acted on instinct. In the end, Astan reflects on a life spent using others and finally acknowledges all the harm he caused. It's honestly laughable. Then, bowing his head, he begs Zenos for forgiveness, not that he believes it'll change anything. Unmoved, Zenos tells him to cut the sob story, because now that he's patched up, it's time to face the consequences of his own actions. And with that, Zenos amplifies his arm strength tenfold and gives one more reason for sparing Astan. He wouldn't have felt right punching someone who was unconscious. Consumed by fury, Zenos lands a solid punch square to Astan's face, no holding back. The guy had put him through hell, and a simple apology wasn't going to cut it. After the beating, the poor man even ends up half naked in the street. Some time later, Astan wakes up thanks to Krishna's persistence. It's the second time she's come to the slums with reports of monster attacks, and the second time she's run into this guy. That aside, Zenos explained everything to her. It's honestly a miracle no one died in a disaster of that scale. Still, despite the happy ending, Astan's facing charges for assault, prison escape, perjury, revenge attacks, property damage, and public indecency for walking around naked. To make matters worse, Krishna tells him that Zenos took his sword. It's a top-tier weapon, and selling it should cover some of the damage costs. Besides, Xenos was the one who found it in the first place. On top of that, the doctor left behind a single gold coin and a final message: their paths should never cross again. Aston breaks down in tears like a child. Meanwhile, Xenos feels so drained he could collapse at any moment. The girls offer to help him walk, but he insists they take care of themselves. They must be exhausted too. Even so, they insist on carrying him. After all, he's always the one looking after them. It's time they return the favor. Somewhere in the middle of all that, the guide decides to disappear for a while. Eventually, Xenos will cross his path again, and when that time comes, they'll get to play once more. When Xenos finally returns home, Carmilla teases him, saying she hoped he had died so she could have a few peaceful days again. But Lily rats her out. Carmilla was actually worried sick. As for the elf, she never doubted for a second. She'd even brewed tea, calmly waiting for her master's return because she knew he'd come back. The next day, the man of the house heads to an establishment to relax after such an intense ordeal. Originally, his plan was to quietly work as an unlicensed healer, but things escalated from 0 to 100 real fast, so he might as well enjoy these small moments of peace. Speaking of peace, someone opens the door to the place where the poor guy was trying to bathe. A few hours earlier, Krishna was frustrated that the investigation into the liar behind the golem attack hadn't turned up much. Still, at least it was confirmed that the culprit is someone known as the Guide. Tracking him down, however, is proving to be no easy task. The place where he met with Aston was already abandoned, and the guide left no trace behind. Zofia did some investigating herself and found out that the guy joined the underground guild only recently, and word is, he doesn't socialize with anyone. Linga heard the same. According to Lobis, the underworld demands that everyone keep their past a secret, so you won't get much by asking around. The Iron Maiden assures them the Order of Knights is still on the suspect's trail, but she fears he won't resurface anytime soon. That said, the three faction leaders agree this man will show up again eventually. The problem is, it's clear he won't be easy to deal with. There's a real chance he'll deepen his ties with the underworld. The kingdom's official investigator asks the demi-human girls to stop throwing around wild guesses, to which they respond that the vice commander's efforts haven't been much different. Xenos tries to keep things civil, suggesting that at least they're all sitting at the same table to talk. But Krishna quickly reminds them that, as a royal knight, she's legally forbidden from sharing tea at the same table with a group of demi-humans. Finally, the doctor, clearly out of patience, asks everyone to calm down, but then promptly kicks all the women out of the clinic. He's tired and will only be seeing emergency patients today. After that, red-faced and clearly nervous, Lily walks into the room and says she's been thinking. Ever since the golem incident, the masters looked exhausted, so she wondered what she could do to help him relax. She had a place in mind that might help, but before she could finish her thought, someone cut her off. It was Zofia, who bursts through the door and boldly suggests they all head to the hot springs to unwind after all the golem drama. Xenos thinks it's a good idea and accepts the invite, leaving Lily heartbroken and cast aside by the sheer audacity of that shameless lizard. Zofia, meanwhile, is beaming with joy. Then Linga shows up with the exact same idea. That wild chase with the stone monster clearly pushed her limits. Again, Xenos agrees, and the wolf girl runs off, thrilled. And of course, Lo barges in just like the others. But before she can say a word, the doctor already assumes she's here to ask him to go to the hot springs. Overwhelmed by what she believes to be a deep mental connection between them, the orc gets teary-eyed and heads out, emotionally moved. But then, in a twist that surprises everyone, even Krishna gives in to the charm of the underground doctor. She opens the door, this time a little more politely, and invites him to the same gathering. After receiving all these invitations, Xenos can't help but wonder why all of them had the exact same idea. When he turns to Lily and asks what she was going to say earlier, the elf is already fed up. Instead of answering, she just pouts in silence. That's when Carmilla shows up, laughing at how all these women are going nuts over Xenos in a towel and hot water. It's been ages since she went to a place like that herself. It might actually be fun to tag along. Xenos scolds her for behaving so crudely for someone who claims to be a high-class specter, but she brushes off the remark like it was nothing. And so, we circle back to the moment when Zenos' peace is shattered by the first visitor of the night, and that visitor is none other than Zofia, the tornado. She places a fake sign saying the men's bath is under maintenance, then sneaks into the doctor's side. She confesses she'd love to jump on him right then and there, but since she's afraid he might hate her for it, she tries to approach him a little more delicately. In fact, she mentions how people have been saying she seems calmer lately, probably because of the friendships she's built with other races in the slums. That kind of harmony would soften even the roughest person on the streets. She used to be a completely different woman, and now she's even talking to a royal knight, something once unthinkable. According to Zofia, it's all because of Zenos. She believes this man has the power to change the world just by bringing people together. Zenos, however, insists he's just a shady healer running a rundown clinic. By this point, Zofia has gotten a little too close, and when the doctor refuses to drop his guard despite her sweet talk, she decides to get physical and lunges at him. Just then, Linga enters, maybe to save him, or maybe not. Claiming she got dizzy from the heat and walked into the men's bath by mistake, she goes head-to-head with Zofia. But let's be honest, her goal is to have the man all to herself. Out of nowhere, Lo bursts from underwater, joining the fight with zero shame and no towel, unlike the others who at least showed a bit of decency. Finally, Krishna storms in and orders all of them to get out of the men's area. They fire back, pointing out that she's also somewhere she shouldn't be. So she quickly claims she just confused this bath with the women's side. Furious that his piece has officially been flushed down the drain, Zenos shouts for them all to get out. Meanwhile, in the real women's bath, a young woman hears the yelling and wonders what the hell is going on. From the sound of that shout, she worries some creep might be nearby threatening to ruin her trip to Flam, the city of hot springs. Just then, the demi-human girls finally show up where they should have been from the beginning, grumbling about how Zenos never lets his guard down. The human girl already there is stunned by the sudden crowd and finds herself staring at them just a little more than she probably should. Zofia asks what she's staring at, catching the girl off guard. Lo is convinced it's just her usual charm pulling in women, supposedly a common thing for someone as privileged as her. Sitting next to the human, Lily complains that, unlike the other girls, she doesn't have melons for breasts, and because of that, she didn't have the courage to show up near Zenos. That said, the elf glances to the side and realizes that the human beside her isn't exactly well endowed either, and that's when it hits her. The smaller a woman's chest, the bigger her heart. Suddenly full of confidence, the little elf steps into the water with a spring in her step. That's when Carmilla finally shows up. Aware of Lily's insecurities, she tells her not to worry. Just like wildflowers in the field, melons grow in their own time. And even if they don't, not everyone prefers them big. Lily wants to know if it's actually possible for someone to like them small, and the ghost nods, waxing poetic that there's a whole abyss of understanding children aren't ready to grasp. Feeling oddly encouraged, Lily mentions that Carmilla looks even more transparent than usual, so the ghost jokingly pretends to vanish forever, sending the elf into a panic. Meanwhile, the unknown human woman notices the ghost's presence and, without hesitation, prepares a sacred spell to attack Carmilla, who bolts through a wall, leaving her towel snagged in the women's area. At that very moment, over in the men's side, Zenos sighs, already fed up. Even the ghost came to ruin my day off. The human, confused, starts to believe it was all just her exhaustion playing tricks on her. She gives up the hostile attitude and decides to relax a little. After their soak in the hot springs, the group is treated to a feast. However, Krishna sits apart from the rest, as she'd mentioned before. Sitting with demi-humans goes against the code of the Knight's Order. The group calls her over, asking her to join them, but she keeps refusing, still crying over the fact that she has to spend her one day off with this group of weirdos. It's clear she's just being dramatic, but Zenos doesn't have the patience for that, so he lets it go. Speaking of weirdos, he asks where Carmilla's disappeared to. Lily explains that she went off to drink alone in her room to unwind. After dinner, Zenos tucks the young elf into bed, only to find the ghost waiting for him in his room. She asks if the feast wasn't to his liking. He says it was, but things took a turn when the girls started a drinking contest, with the winner getting to sit in the doctor's lap. That got a little out of hand, to say the least. He sighs, lamenting that this trip was supposed to be peaceful. Not that. Carmilla chuckles, understanding his frustration, but urges him to enjoy these lively moments while they last because soon, everything will get complicated again. Curious, Zenos asks how she even got there, especially since she can't be out in the sunlight. Carmilla explains that her body is so subtle it barely exists, and she can possess objects she's emotionally tied to. For instance, she inhabited the staff Lily carried around all day, which, once upon a time, belonged to the ghost herself. Speaking of which, Zenos asks what she used to do when she was alive, but Carmilla claims it's been so long she can't even remember anymore. The healer picks up on the fact that she clearly doesn't like talking about her past, so they both go back to drinking in silence. The next morning, at the same hot spring inn, the fire monostones powering the oven suddenly explode in the kitchen, severely injuring a man, leaving him burned and lying on the ground while his wife screams in panic. The girl from the night before the one bathing rushes in to help. She's a healer, and immediately starts treating the man, but from the state of his arm, she concludes it'll likely never heal. Just then, Zenos arrives, having heard the explosion, and introduces himself to the two women as just another guest. The healer explains there's a hospital in the city center where the man could be properly treated and asks Zenos to help carry him there. But to everyone's surprise, the man says that won't be necessary. Lily shows up, panicking, but Zenos calms her down, and just when everyone thought he was about to walk away, heading to the carriage waiting outside the inn, the healer turns back and fully restores the injured man, leaving him as good as new. The young healer is stunned. The kind of treatment she just witnessed could only be performed by a saint or some top-tier professional. Still in awe, she later returns to her kingdom's castle and reports everything to a superior. The man listens intently, and although elite healers like that are said to be fewer than 10 in the entire world, he says there's no rush to investigate this Zenos guy. It's hardly a top priority. But when the girl mentions that Zenos was wearing a long black coat, something clicks in the superior's mind. Suddenly, he changes his tune and decides to track down the mysterious healer immediately. The girl asks what changed his mind, and the man simply says he felt like meeting this fellow elite healer. Sometime later, Zond barges into Zenos' clinic carrying a man who collapsed coughing up blood, and that man turns out to be the very healer sent to investigate the underground doctor. After just a brief consultation, Zenos diagnoses the man with red lung, the same disease that once caused a widespread pandemic, sending countless people to an early grave. Supposedly, red lung had been wiped out thanks to a cure, yet somehow, it's back in a new and more aggressive form. Once Zenos finishes his diagnosis, the patient suddenly sits up as if nothing happened. He praises the doctor's sharp instincts and finally introduces himself. Bernardo Becker, elite healer of the Royal Hospital. Though, truth be told, he admits he's never been great at healing magic himself. Then, the healer from the hot springs inn arrives, and Bernardo greets her as human. She's furious her superior had fallen seriously ill and had the nerve to ask her to support him while being dragged to this clinic. Coughing up blood, Bernardo argues that it was the best way to find the underground healer. He then pulls a healing potion from his pocket and drinks it. He admits he took a drug that mimics the symptoms of red lung, hoping someone would rescue him and bring him to this exact clinic. Now that he's taken the antidote he made himself, he'll be fine soon enough. Zenos realizes that this is the very doctor who developed the cure for the pandemic disease. Human confirms it proudly, saying it was the treatments he created for a few illnesses that earned him the title of elite healer. Trying to stay humble, Bernardo Becker brushes it off as no big deal. By the way, when he heard there was a healer wearing a black coat around here, he thought he might run into an old acquaintance, but it turned out to be someone else. Zenos explains that the coat belonged to his mentor. Though he never learned the man's name, he simply never said it. In any case, Becker invites Zenos to work at the Royal Hospital, to help with a case where a stranger might have an easier time getting involved. Just then, the three demi-human leaders arrive at the clinic, drawn by the sight of the clinic's raised red emergency flag. Zenos figures it must have been Carmilla who raised it. The three women stand in front of the doctor, blocking his way, unwilling to let the Royal Hospital take him away. Impressed by how fiercely the healer is protected in the slums, Bernardo changes his approach. He proposes an official service agreement to formalize Zenos' work with the Royal Hospital. Zenos agrees without hesitation. Now that the authorities know about his underground clinic, it might be useful to have them owe him a few favors. He also recalls how, during the Red Lung pandemic, the Royal Hospital handed out free medicine throughout the slums, saving countless lives. Yuman explains that it was Dr. Becker who made sure the antidote reached the poor, even paying for it out of his own pocket. The three leaders acknowledge how much that helped back then, and Zenos seems excited to learn that this healer once knew his mentor. Before long, Bernardo Becker wins over the hearts of the slum residents. Finally, the royal doctor promises to help Zenos return to a peaceful life once their mission is complete. He officially invites the underground healer to join him on a mission whose details remain a mystery for now. In the next moment, the underground healer is dressed in a very different outfit than usual. Standing in front of the royal hospital, Zenos walks confidently in his crisp white uniform, clearly impressed, as he follows Bernardo Becker to his research lab. Honestly, the sheer luxury makes his head spin, and he asks if there isn't at least one dark and damp room around here. Yuman tells him to stop acting like he's from the slums, at least while he's in this place. But there's just no way he can leave behind his roots like they're not an essential part of who he is. Eventually, Bernardo leads the guest to his office and starts going over the mission. But before he can say anything, Zenos takes a wild guess. It's about missing people. When the elite healer confirms it, Zenos makes it clear that finding lost folks isn't exactly his specialty. But all the royal doctor really wants is for him to walk around and gather a few leads. Besides, special students at the Royal Hospital can access all sorts of programs through recommendations, unlike regular students, which makes information gathering way easier. That said, the idea is for Zenos to act under the name Zeno, someone who just arrived from abroad. Skeptical, Zenos seriously doubts this story will hold up, but Bernardo assures him that having an elite healer backing his identity makes everything run much smoother. The outsider kind of likes the idea of blaming the royal doc if things go south, and Bernardo jokes that, at this point, their fates are pretty much tied together. Later on, Zenos follows Yuman to check out the dorm where he'll be staying and is met with a warm welcome from Lily, who, for some reason, is already there. Confused, the boy asks what's going on, and Yuman explains that according to the rules, close relatives and important individuals are allowed to live in the dorms together. Lily confirms this and proudly says she qualifies as the doctor's wife, though Yuman corrects her, explaining that on paper, the elf is listed as his younger sister. Either way, Zenos had been worried about leaving the little one behind, so he's thankful for the chance to keep her close. Eventually, Yuman leaves, letting the new resident settle in. The first thing Lily does is offer him food, a bath, and, in the end, herself. Zenos, taken aback, asks who taught her to talk like that. That's when Carmel appears, shamelessly admitting that it was her. The doctor gets irritated and demands to know what that ghost is doing here. She casually replies that she came to be a nuisance, just as he suspected. Running out of patience, Zenos points out that a spirit like her will be exorcised the moment she's spotted by one of the many healers living in this place. But Carmel argues that she can't really be considered a nuisance if she's scared of those things. Besides, not everyone can use healing magic like this kid. And honestly, as Zenos sees it, that's just how this woman is, and nothing's ever going to change that. Later, in the cafeteria, he meets up with Yuman, who's trying to get used to calling him Zeno. She wants to know how the orientation went. He says it looks like he'll be going around to different places, though he still doesn't know how people even get a regular healer license here. Yuman explains, first, he needs to enroll in a preparatory school for healers. If he passes, he'll spend a few years studying there. Then, if he passes the exam, he'll earn his license. Zenos is shocked at how much of a grind it is to get this damn license and admits that healers really are impressive for going through all of that. Yuman finds it ironic someone so gifted praising others like they're somehow better than him. She goes on to explain that once he passes the test, Zenos will be sent to work in a royal hospital branch or get an adventurer's license to work out in the field. Some people also end up serving the nobility or the military. After gaining enough experience, he'll eventually be able to take a test to move up the ranks. Zenos doesn't seem the least bit excited about this mountain of exams he'll have to climb just to make it in this place. His head's already starting to hurt. Wanting to change the subject, he asks about the missing person. Yuman tells him it's someone named Alfred, a senior of hers, a high-level healer, and the assistant head of the lab. Alfred is known for being incredibly talented, kind, and attentive. He also played a key role in curing the red lung disease. Realizing how important this guy is, Xenos asks if there are any leads to kick off the search. Yumin is just about to share the first clue when someone else walks into the cafeteria and grabs everyone's attention. According to Yumin, that's Professor Goldrin, the vice director of the Royal Hospital and a 7th class advanced healer. Xenos asks what this class thing is about, and Yumin explains that healing ability is ranked by levels, from beginner to advanced. A 7th class healer is the highest level before becoming elite. Xenos watches the entourage trailing behind the man and figures he must be a big deal. Yumin confirms that Goldrin is in the running to become the next director, since the current one is elderly and often absent, so the vice director is basically acting as the head now. She adds that the hospital has changed a lot since Goldrin stepped into his role. For example, while the rich get treated like royalty, the poor have been getting less and less attention. Goldrin seems more focused on pushing his political agenda than actually improving his healing skills, and there are rumors that his promotion to 7th class wasn't based on merit, but on connections, what they call the who you know factor. Apparently, he had the full backing of several nobles who wanted him representing their interests on the board. Given all that, Xenos decides to steer clear of this guy. If there's one thing people like that hate, it's the poor. But Yumin's not so sure he'll be able to avoid him. She suspects Goldrin might be involved in Alfred's disappearance. The man is so ambitious that he seems determined to gather as much talent as possible under his command. He invited Alfred over under the pretense of borrowing the lab he shared with Yumin. Bernardo Becker wasn't happy about it, of course, but since Goldrin had financially supported the red lung cure, Becker felt indebted and eventually gave in. Alfred himself thought it would be a great opportunity to broaden his horizons, but just a month later, he vanished. To get close to Goldrin without raising suspicion, Xenos needs to stand out in the Royal Hospital's programs enough to catch the professor's attention. If that happens, the professor will approach him on his own. Naturally, Xenos doubts he's capable of pulling that off. After all, he's nothing more than an underground doctor. Yumin, on the other hand, is stunned that this guy has absolutely no clue what he's really capable of. Speaking of what people are capable of, an annoying guy approaches the girl in the most intrusive way possible. When Yumin sees it's the unbearable Crescent, she tries to brush him off. But since he's part of Goldrin's faction, the guy thinks he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and keeps pestering her. Then he turns his attention to Xenos, saying he must be the special student who enrolled recently, and warns him to try not to embarrass the person who recommended him. After that, Crescent finally walks off. Yumin explains that the two of them used to be classmates, but ever since he joined Goldrin's group, he's been acting like he's all that. Xenos doesn't care much, though, and just heads off to class. In the next scene, we get a glimpse of Xenos' childhood, specifically a memory of when he was observing the muscle distribution and blood vessel network of a man collapsed in the middle of the street, trying to heal him. But instead of saving the man, all he gets is a punch in the head from his master, who tells him he should focus his energy on examining the living, not the dead. Back then, alongside his fellow student Veritra, who was also training under the same teacher, they were often praised for how much they'd improved in just a year. But the man made sure they didn't get cocky just because they'd learned to close a few wounds. That, he said, only made them third-rate healers. Veritra added that healing and comforting might make you second-rate, and Xenos chimed in, saying that only the best in the world would ever be considered first-rate, something he'd heard so often it had started to haunt his dreams. The teacher laughed, glad the boy finally got the point, and the two students chuckled. Snapping back to the present, Xenos focuses as class begins. The professor introduces himself as a specialist in treating adventurers and announces that today's topic is undead. As the lecture goes on, Xenos reflects on how he already knows a lot about the subject from experience, but the structured way it's being taught actually makes everything much easier to grasp. At one point, a student asks about specters. The professor finds the question interesting, as very little is known about these high-level, undead, mainly because hardly anyone has seen one, and most adventurers who do end up dead. In short, if you run into one, the best thing you can do is run away. What's worse, the ones that can speak are even more dangerous. Xenos starts to worry because there is a specter in his room right now, and it doesn't seem like these people are particularly fond of them. Anyway, the professor asks the class to share their experiences with the undead. That's when Crescent Wembley proudly claims he once took down about 30 ghosts during his years as an adventurer. He gets a round of applause from the class, then turns to Xenos and asks if the special student has a story of his own. Spotlight on him, Xenos knows that drawing too much attention would be a terrible move, even if he could wipe out 50 ghosts in one go. So, he decides to say something similar, claiming that he, too, defeated about 30 of them during his travels, trying to match the obnoxious guy. Crescent grins slyly and accuses him of lying. It's impossible, he says, to take down that many ghosts so quickly. That's when Xenos realizes he slipped up. He made it sound like he took them all out at once. And just like that, all eyes are on him. Even the professor presses him to explain what he meant. Cornered, Xenos tries to spin the story. If you go into the underground labyrinth where there are tons of ghosts, you can cast a healing spell and knock out a bunch at once. But the professor points out that only gold-class adventurers are allowed in that labyrinth garmenton. Now Xenos realizes he just sank even deeper into his own lie. Clearly jealous, Crescent decides then and there that he doesn't like this kid. Still, in the next class, he sits right next to Xenos and tells him to quit showing off just to get attention. Either way, the next class begins, this time about magic circles. Xenos thinks the topic's kind of pointless. Why waste time drawing stuff when you could just heal someone directly? When the professor asks for a volunteer to draw on the board, Crescent steps up and impresses everyone, earning himself an invite to the professor's lab. Bragging, he mentions that he already works for Professor Goldrin. Then, just to mess with the new kid, he nominates Xenos to take the next turn. So, Xenos draws the only magic circle he knows, the one his mentor taught him back when he was a kid. Crescent bursts out laughing, saying he's never seen anything so ridiculous. But the professor goes pale. He recognizes the drawing as a rare regeneration spell that stacks multiple effects into one, a spell supposedly impossible for a regular human to activate. Xenos just shrugs it off, saying the circle's useless. Healing a finger is way faster than drawing some magic doodle. The professor, now desperate, begs Xenos to join his lab, while Crescent stews in silent rage. Meanwhile, Goldrin hears about Xenos through the grapevine words spreading about the new student who can apparently take down 30 ghosts at once. But Goldrin, arrogant as ever, isn't impressed. Then, another assistant reports that undead have been spotted in the Sula cemetery. Seeing an opportunity, the vice principal decides to send Xenos on the mission. If the boy really can do what he claims, this could be his ticket into Goldrin's faction. Later, back at the dorm, Xenos tells his friends about the mission. That's when he notices something odd. Carmel, the Spectre girl, is different from the others. For some reason, she eats solid food like the dinner laid out on the table. At night, a group of healers is sent to the Sula cemetery to exorcise the ghosts, and the doctors quickly get to work banishing the first few spirits. Xenos turns to Human and comments that this method of taking out 1 or 2 ghosts at a time is terribly inefficient, and he's proven right when the apparitions start to swarm the doctors, leaving everyone rattled, including Crescent. Without wasting a second, Xenos raises his hand and wipes out all the monsters in a single strike. But Crescent, ever the opportunist, pretends he's the one who did it. Human, clearly irritated, calls him out and says it was Xenos, but the boy clings to the lie, counting on his inflated reputation to convince the others that he was the one who vanquished the ghosts. And he doesn't stop there. As the team leader on this mission, Crescent demands that everyone report to the professors about his supposed feat at the cemetery, stealing every bit of credit from Xenos. Then, as he dismisses the group, still high on his ego trip, he ends up letting it slip that he was ordered to keep an eye on the special student. Before anyone can even process that, a zombie king suddenly appears in the area, catching the healers off guard. Panic sets in, and everyone looks to Crescent Wembley as their last hope to defeat such a dangerous enemy. While Crescent is practically wetting himself, Human eggs him on, daring him to prove he's really the badass he claims to be. Xenos plays along, leaving the guy to face the monster alone. With nowhere to run, Crescent throws a high heal spell straight at the zombie king's chest, only for the creature to recover instantly from the best magic he had to offer. Realizing he doesn't stand a chance, Crescent takes off in a full-blown panic, but still has the nerve to act like he's going toe-to-toe with the giant. Meanwhile, Yuman figures out that the other ghosts were drawn there by the stronger undead, which is usually what happens in these cases. She even tells Xenos to let Crescent take a beating and learn his lesson the hard way. Despite how harsh she sounds, Xenos realizes she's actually worried about the guy and even says so, especially since she's one of the few who hasn't run away yet. Caught off guard, Yuman brushes it off, saying someone has to be there to collect the body when the poor idiot inevitably dies. After taking 2 more brutal hits, Crescent can't even move anymore. The Zombie King grabs him with crushing force, and it's obvious the kid's not making it out of this unless someone steps in. Just as the creature is about to devour him, Xenos casts a mega heal and shuts the whole thing down in one clean move. Even after being saved from certain death, Crescent keeps up his arrogant act, insisting he could have handled it without any help. Yuman fires back at the ungrateful jerk, while Xenos quietly reflects on how stronger undead seem to attract the weaker ones. With that thought in mind, for some reason, he turns to the two and apologizes. Back in the dormitory, Carmel suddenly lets out a loud sneeze. Lily asks if she's caught a cold, but the ghost scoffs at the idea as if someone from the top of the undead hierarchy could ever get sick. According to the ghost, this is happening because someone must be thinking about her. Lily says Carmilla must be pretty popular, and the spirit laughs, complimenting the elf stew. Lily smiles, enjoying how good her friend is at giving compliments too. The two share a laugh until Xenos walks through the door. He explains that a bunch of undead are being drawn to an even stronger one, but Carmilla doesn't look surprised. She figures her own magnetic aura must have spilled all the way into that graveyard. She teasingly asks if Xenos is planning to kick her out because of it, but the doctor decides it's safer to keep the ghost nearby, considering the kind of effect she seems to have. Lily finds the whole thing adorable and wishes the human would say something like that to her too. Carmilla, on the other hand, gets flustered and can barely hide it. She argues that it's at least curious for a guy to ask an outcast spirit to stay by his side, but hey, if he insists, she's more than willing to be a massive pain in everyone's life. Back at the academy, Crescent is called into a meeting where a superior tells him that, according to the other students, he did remarkably well during the undead extermination. The downside is that it means the so-called special student, Xeno, didn't live up to expectations. Crescent is told to keep supporting the professor's cause and is dismissed. But then, the young student has a moment of integrity. After a bit of internal struggle, he admits that while he did do well, it was actually Xeno who took down the undead horde and the Zombie King. Leaving the meeting, Crescent's ego takes a hit for telling the truth, but now, in his mind, he and Xeno are officially even. Meanwhile, Xenos hears from Bernardo Becker that he's been summoned by the Goldrin Research Lab following the success of the undead mission. Xenos is surprised. He thought the narrative was that Crescent had carried the entire operation, but it's good to know he's finally getting some credit. Becker tells him the next step is an interview with Professor Goldrin. Xenos is already nervous about the Academy's never-ending bureaucracy, but Becker makes it clear there's no skipping steps. Goldrin's particular about authority and titles. Xenos, slightly annoyed, asks why Becker isn't considered more important than Goldrin after all. He's an elite healer. But Bernardo explains that having a title doesn't mean you hold political power. In his case, recognition came from developing medicine, not from status. Still, Xenos accepts the challenge and shows up to meet Professor Goldrin, who's accompanied by his second secretary. Wasting no time, Goldrin asks what the special student can do. Xenos replies honestly, the only thing he knows in life is how to heal people. The professor scoffs it's the bare minimum for a healer. With the kind of power Xenos has, he should be aiming higher. Healers, after all, hold enormous influence in this country. In fact, the nation's history is basically the history of its doctors. Right now, though, the ruling class is reaping most of the rewards, and Goldrin intends to join their ranks soon, ensuring his faction gets its fair share. In his view, people should receive care equal to what they're capable of offering in return, especially healers. As vice director of the Royal Hospital, he's blunt. Not all lives are equal, and of course the rich and poor would receive different levels of treatment. With that said, he asks Xenos to recreate the magic circle he drew in their last class, just to see if he'll be useful. Without hesitation, Xenos sketches it out on a piece of paper, then asks what exactly this proves. Goldrin explains, it's evidence of Zenos' knowledge in healing magic and whether that knowledge has questionable roots. Looking at the drawing, Goldrin notes there are many schools of thought when it comes to magic circles. In healing magic, certain principles must be followed. If they're missing, it usually means the person wasn't formally trained, and to work for Goldrin, you have to prove you're a legitimate healer. That said, he finds Zenos' magic circle fascinating. It's unlike anything he's ever seen. So, he gives the boy a chance to join the lab starting tomorrow. Zenos exhales in relief. The next day, he sees a line of healers trailing behind Professor Goldrin like ducklings following their mother. Among them is Crescent, who calls out to him to wake up and get in line. Zenos does, and Crescent proudly declares himself the senior of his new lab colleague, then makes sure Zenos knows he's only there because Crescent pulled a few strings behind the scenes. Zenos asks why he would do that, and Crescent just laughs. He admits he plans to use the special student as a stepping stone to climb the faction ranks. At least he's honest. Zenos then asks what the line is even for. Crescent explains, it's the professor's daily rounds. He visits patients with his whole entourage. Zenos notes that, for someone at the back of the line, Crescent doesn't seem all that impressive. That hits a nerve. Crescent gets fired up and swears he'll be at the top soon enough. Drama aside, Zenos wants to understand why this entourage is so big. Crescent explains, it's all about making an impression, especially since Goldrin only visits the upper class. Hearing that, Zenos breaks away from the group and runs straight to the front. He needs to learn more about this professor and the disappearances rumored to surround him. Soon, he catches up to Goldrin, who's listening to a patient complain about a sharp pain after twisting his ankle getting out of bed. Goldrin examines the injury, gathers 3 students, and casts a chain healing spell to fully restore the man's foot. After watching that scene, Zenos ran back to the end of the line, only to get an earful from Crescent for acting like a lunatic. He asked what kind of magic Goldrin had used with all those healers, and Crescent explained that the professor specialized in health transference magic basically, a spell that transfers life force from one person to another to heal injuries. It can create amazing results, even if the caster isn't a particularly skilled healer. The more serious the injury, the more life force is required from others to bring the patient back, meaning you'll need more people willing to donate a bit of their vitality. It may sound harsh, but the energy loss is minimal, and donors usually walk away with just a bit of fatigue. Hearing this, Zenos understood why the professor wanted so many people in his faction. Crescent added that there was another, bigger reason: the upcoming election for headmaster. Rumor has it that the current director, Shalbard, is planning to retire soon. Goldrin's aiming to secure votes so he can take his place. At this rate, it'd be hard for anyone to compete with him, and Crescent believed that his professor's victory would be the perfect stepping stone to the top. Zenos told him he was a good guy for sharing all this valuable info. Crescent got flustered and insisted he was just using Zenos, nothing more. While the conversation was still flowing, the special student had another question. He wanted to know if Crescent knew someone named Afreed. According to him, Afreed was just some loser who disappeared after disappointing the professor. He vanished right after getting invited to a dinner party, and no one really knew why. Apparently, Professor Goldrin occasionally holds these private dinners for his favorite students, and getting that invitation means you're destined to become one of the faction's leaders. Later that day, Zenos hurried back to Bernardo and shared everything he'd learned. He figured his job was done now that he'd delivered all that info, but Becker quickly shot that down. They were still far from the evidence they needed. In fact, Zenos now had to become one of Goldrin's favorites to gain access to sensitive intel. Of course, there'd be extra cash in it for him, not to mention he'd still be allowed to carry on his shady dealings on the outskirts. Zenos agreed, but only if Bernardo would finally talk about his own mentor. Becker promised he would, but then bumped into a shelf, knocking down books and a bunch of coins. He turned to Zenos and asked, "If you had to clean this up, which coin would you pick up first?" Right after that, he followed up with a deeper question: did Zenos believe that all lives should have the same value? But before he could answer, Human walked in, cutting the conversation short. Bernardo headed off to a meeting, leaving Zenos in charge of the next phase of the mission. Zenos stared down at the scattered coins and promised himself he'd do whatever it took. That night, Linga used her thieving skills to pick the lock on the door to the underground clinic. Her reason for breaking in? She just wanted to get a good, deep sniff of the doctor's bed. But instead, she ran into Zofia, who had also broken in. The two quickly pretended they were just there to clean the place up. Moments later, Lo barged in with far less grace, admitting she'd had the same idea. With nowhere to hide and no excuses left, the three women ended up scrubbing the entire clinic until sunrise. Lo tried to claim points for fixing the broken door, but the others reminded her she was the one who broke it in the first place. In the morning, Crescent offered Xenos the great honor of helping out someone as glorious as himself. The task? Looking after the professor's dog? For today, though, Xenos was just supposed to watch and learn. He asked if his friend did anything more useful around the lab than pet sitting. Crescent explained that he also walked her, brought her meals, gave her baths, and handled everything else. At the moment, Goldrin was in a meeting with the 7 high-ranking nobles he was trying to win over. If things went well, Crescent figured he'd be moving up soon. Once he reached a position of importance, he'd have good food, beautiful women, and people to order around. That was the real reason he worked so hard. Xenos had thought that being a healer meant saving lives, but Crescent admitted that was just a front. Sure, he once dreamed of saving people, but there are things even healing magic can't fix. In this world, the only things that truly work are money and the power it can buy. Just then, a man walked up and asked if Crescent was stuck babysitting Goldrin's arrogant little mutt again. Crescent immediately recognized him. It was Mr. Bonds, so he bowed and insisted he was doing his best. With zero filters, Bonds admitted he found the dog super annoying, which made Crescent panic a bit. What if the professor overheard? Clearly fed up with the kid's bootlicking, the man just walked off. Xenos asked who he was, and Crescent explained that Bonds was Goldrin's first secretary. In reality, though, the guy hardly ever worked, he just wandered around with booze in hand. Word is, he and Goldrin go way back, and that connection was enough to land him the job. Speaking of the drunk, Bonds suddenly hurled his liquor bottle at Crescent. It missed, crashed to the ground, and shattered. Startled by the commotion, Madame Milk managed to slip free from Crescent's grip and bolted. The students took off after the dog at full speed. Milk darted into the street right as a carriage was passing through. She was hit hard and seriously injured. Crescent rushed to save her before it was too late. He cast High Heal, hoping to get her back on her feet, but the spell didn't work. That's when Xenos stepped in. Crescent insisted it was pointless, but then watched in disbelief as the dog's wounds vanished without leaving so much as a scar. He nearly lost his mind trying to figure out how that was possible. Meanwhile, Xenos acted like it was the most normal thing in the world after all. Isn't that what healing magic is supposed to do? After restoring the pup, Xenos scooped her up to find a place where she could rest. Crescent chased after him, desperate not to lose the only job he had in the whole lab. Late in the afternoon, Yumin invites Xenos for a walk. As they stroll, she takes the opportunity to apologize to him. If she were more capable, she says, she might have been able to catch Professor Goldrin's attention herself, sparing Xenos from having to take on so much. She knows that just saying sorry doesn't mean much, but it's all she can offer for now. Xenos tells her it's alright, he'll be rewarded for the effort he's putting in. Besides, he feels good about setting foot in the Royal Hospital and getting the chance to learn more about his former mentor. That last part catches Yumin's attention. She's curious what kind of person was his mentor. But the truth is, Xenos isn't really sure himself. In his mind, the man always seemed a bit shady, and yet he was the one who taught Xenos how to read and write, and opened his eyes to the world beyond, about diseases, about magic. In a way, Xenos feels like he owes his entire life to him. Yumin can relate. She says Becker holds the same place in her life. He guided her closely when she decided to become a healer. His dedication to research cost him his relationship. His girlfriend left him, and now, Yumin is pretty much the only one who looks after the elite healer. Still, that's not how their story started. As it turns out, Bernardo Becker is actually Yumin's uncle, her mother's younger brother. Even though she's in good hands, Yumin admits she's not particularly good at what she does. Right now, she's working on research about medicine storage, but to be honest, she finds it incredibly boring. Xenos agrees it sounds dull, but then again, he adds, the most important things in life often are boring. At least, that's what his mentor once told him. Yumin smiles and says Xenos is an interesting guy. And just then, a voice rings out, Carmilla's voice, teasing that the guy sure seems to be a magnet for women. Yuman glances around, trying to figure out where the voice came from, while Xenos awkwardly tries to play it down. The next day, Professor Goldrin's assistant asked how lunch with Lord Fennel had gone. Irritated, the professor shot back, was he really the type to cause a scene over lunch? The assistant immediately realized he'd overstepped and apologized. That triggered a memory for Goldrin. During the meeting, Lord Fennel had asked him to examine his daughter, who'd developed a rash on her face a week ago, and it had only been getting worse. At the time, Goldrin had said it might be a case of strange face. He explained it wasn't life-threatening, but if the rash was already visible, it meant the disease had taken deep root. The number of incisions might even leave scars. With enough donors and a health transfer spell, the skin could be regenerated without issue, but Fennel noted that his daughter would never agree to that. Too many people would see her face. In the end, Goldrin realized he could count on 1 or 2 assistants at best. Moments like this usually left him tense, so he went off to unwind the way he always did, spending time with his beloved dog, Milk. But just as he stepped out of his office, he ran into Mr. Bonds drunk, as always. Bonds casually dropped a bombshell. The professor's little dog had been hit by a carriage. In a flash, Goldrin grabbed him by the collar, demanding an explanation. Bonds claimed he didn't know who was responsible, but that the caretaker had healed Milk, and she was perfectly fine now. Still not fully convinced, Goldrin rushed off to see for himself, confirming with his secretary on the way that the dog had, in fact, been run over. When he arrived, he found her in perfect condition and wondered who on earth could perform such a flawless healing spell without leaving a single scar or trace. Later that night, Crescent Wembley was in full panic mode. He begged for help. Since he was the one looking after Milk, everyone assumed he had done the miracle healing, and now they wanted him to treat the daughter of one of the 7 most powerful nobles. She had strange face, and it had advanced so far that they'd need to remove a huge section of tissue. The scarring was expected to be so severe, most considered it better to leave the disease alone. If he messed up this noble girl's face, Crescent would be finished. Yuman asked why Professor Goldrin dumped such a nightmare task on a kid like Crescent. But Crescent just muttered that maybe the Academy finally realized how brilliant he was. That didn't hold for long. He gave up on the lie and admitted Goldrin had asked him directly. Unlike the Zombie King incident, where he failed to give credit to the special student who actually saved the day, this time Crescent claimed the healing was his, afraid he'd be discarded by the Academy if the truth came out. At that moment, Lily arrived with tea for the guests. Crescent hadn't expected Xenos to have such a cute little sister. The girl blushed at the compliment, but made it very clear she belonged to her big brother. Confused, Crescent asked if they were that kind of siblings. Xenos quickly shut that down. Regardless, Crescent declared that if she was Xenos' sister, then she was his sister too. The elf didn't seem thrilled by that idea. At dawn, Lord Fennel called an emergency meeting with Professor Goldrin. His daughter Charlotte was refusing the surgery. She had locked herself in her room, convinced that any scar on her face was unacceptable. Fennel's only hope was that the doctors could heal her without leaving a single mark, so he asked Goldrin to convince the girl to go through with the procedure. So Fennel, Goldrin, Crescent, and Xenos headed to her room. Just before opening the door, Charlotte grumbled from inside, reminding her father he'd promised her a Firefox fur scarf for her birthday, and she'd gotten nothing. Goldrin gently asked for her trust, assuring her he could cure the illness. But she flat out refused. She wouldn't even think about a blade touching her face. In her mind, this was all a setup by that jealous girl from the Geese family, who'd always envied Charlotte's stunning beauty. Outside the door, Crescent had a brilliant idea. They'd convince Charlotte to undergo surgery, heal her flawlessly, and she'd fall in love with him. Then they'd marry and bam, he'd become a noble. Genius. With that fantasy in his head, he asked to speak to Charlotte alone. But as soon as he introduced himself, she dismissed him outright, saying she wouldn't talk to some lowly assistant. Just like that, Crescent's romantic dreams were crushed, and he concluded that women simply couldn't be trusted. Goldrin subtly nodded toward Xenos. It was his turn to tame the beast. Unbothered, the rogue healer approached Charlotte and said that if she didn't want the surgery, that was totally fine. Anyone would be scared to have their face cut open, and since the disease wouldn't kill her, it made sense that she might decline. Worst case, her face would just age dramatically, but she'd probably get used to it. Then he left. Goldrin grabbed him by the shoulders, visibly asking, "What the hell are you doing?" But to everyone's surprise, Charlotte opened the door and invited them in. The first thing Crescent noticed was the collection of magically projected photographs, each one worth a fortune, no doubt. Charlotte asked if it was true she'd end up looking like an old lady. Crescent confirmed it, but she immediately told him to shut up before he stunk up the room with his breath. Goldrin stepped in, a bit embarrassed, and admitted that yes, it could happen. Strange face, if left untreated for a month, could evolve to resemble the wrinkles of an elderly woman. The only way to prevent that was through surgery. Faced with that hard truth, Charlotte freaked out. She didn't want surgery, but she didn't want some hideous tumor on her face either. Crescent watched, thinking she's spoiled to the core. Fennel tried to reason with her. If nothing was done, the growth would only get worse. She needed to let the professor operate and remove it without leaving scars. But that only made things worse. Charlotte didn't trust Goldrin, and before storming off, she made one thing crystal clear. She would never agree to the surgery if there was even the slightest risk of scarring her face. In the end, since it was Zenos who managed to convince the girl to at least open her bedroom door, the professor turns to him as if to pass the responsibility onto the student. So Zenos heads out to a balcony where several birds are kept in cages. That's where Charlotte is. He asks if she likes birds, but she throws the same insult again, saying she can smell his breath from across the room. Ignoring the jab, Zenos gently picks up one of the injured birds, and Charlotte explains that she found it yesterday in the garden. According to her, the poor thing can't fly anymore just like her. She won't be able to wear her beautiful dresses and dance at the balls again. For the last time, the healer asks if she wants to be cured, and this time, she snaps. Yes, she says as long as she doesn't end up with scars all over her face. She demands to know who he thinks he's talking to, and the doctor calmly replies, "A patient." As he says that, the wounded bird takes flight. That moment makes Lord Fennel's daughter look at Zenos in a different light. He goes on to explain that if Charlotte has a condition and is asking for treatment, then she is his patient, and it doesn't matter if she's rich or poor. His job is to heal patients. The bird lands on her finger, and Zenos adds that she will dance again, just like that bird now flies again. In the next scene, we see that Charlotte finally agreed to undergo surgery. In the operating room, Fennel begs the doctors to take good care of his daughter, while Zenos notices that Bernardo Becker has already prepared the sedative. Right before the procedure, Goldrin reminds the team what's at stake if the students fail this important mission, and Crescent visibly trembles at the warning. Seeing him shake, Zenos offers to take over, especially since he's done this kind of surgery before back when he was just a kid. But Goldrin reminds them that it was Crescent, the caretaker of Milk, who healed the puppy, so he should be the one to operate. The boy tries to push back, but it's no use. So Crescent positions his scalpel near Charlotte's face. Zenos tells him to stop trembling or else the girl's going to walk out of surgery looking like Chucky. Crescent mutters that this operation is ranked a plus in difficulty, but the professor isn't in the mood for complaints. He tells the student to begin. Crescent remembers that the roots of the strange face usually grow toward 3, 7, and 10 o'clock. But before cutting, Zenos uses his scan ability to do a deeper check, revealing that the roots don't always follow the same pattern. In Charlotte's case, they point toward 2, 6, 9, and 10 o'clock. With that, Zenos tells Crescent to follow his instructions exactly. Hours later, Crescent Wembley is handling the surgery surprisingly well, carefully following Zenos' whispered directions. Even Professor Goldrin is impressed. But at a critical moment, the young surgeon discovers that the roots are tangled up in the nerves. In other words, he'll need to cut the nerves to fully remove them. Goldrin urges caution, saying that doing so could drastically alter the girl's appearance. On the other hand, Crescent argues that leaving the roots could make the tumor grow back, and they could always convince Charlotte to do a follow-up procedure at the Royal Hospital. Still, the vice principal insists that the roots must be removed immediately, otherwise, they could grow back stronger than before and damage his reputation at the academy. If they go through with it, Charlotte's face might change, but if they don't, she could end up severely disfigured in no time. So, even if it hurts his chances in the upcoming director election, Goldrin is willing to accept some damage to prevent worse. Then, he intentionally distracts Crescent and causes the student to cut one of the girl's nerves and immediately shifts the blame onto him in front of Charlotte's father, who's waiting outside and overhears everything. Faced with the situation, the professor claims the only solution now is to take the girl to the Royal Hospital the next day, where he can reconnect the nerves using health transfer magic, though this won't completely restore her. But Zenos says that won't be necessary. Since the roots had grown in so deep and the nerves had to be cut, they just need to be reconnected. Fennel asks if his daughter will be alright. The special student confidently says yes, Charlotte believed he would make her dance again, and it's his duty to fulfill that promise. With that, the young healer summons his magical scalpel and begins a new round of surgery, this time infused with a high level of healing magic. Hours later, the surgery is a complete success. Charlotte wakes up in bed and, even before hugging her father, pushes him aside to check the mirror. Seeing that everything went perfectly and she's fully healed, she bursts into tears of relief and joy, and so does Fennel. The nobleman vows to support Professor Goldrin in the upcoming director election after such a tremendous service. As for Charlotte, something tells her that the one who saved her was the same boy who healed that bird. When a butler tells her his name is Zenos, she returns to the bird balcony and softly whispers his name as she looks out over the horizon. Meanwhile, Zenos is helping Newman carry a massive load of bottles, all experimental potions from Dr. Becker that need to be hauled to storage. Zenos is curious about what's inside them, but Newman says even Bernardo probably doesn't know. According to him, random experimentation holds the promise of breakthroughs. Right then, Bernardo Becker himself shows up at the storage room and thanks the students for their help. He mentions that this batch of potions will be particularly valuable, though Newman jokes that he says that every time. Setting that aside, the doctor already heard about how the noble girl's surgery went, and he's not surprised. With a student like Zenos, it was only a matter of time before Professor Goldrin gained even more prestige. And speaking of the professor's assistant, the other helper bursts into the storage room, completely out of breath. Crescent, nearly gasping for air, announces that he and Zenos have just been invited to one of Goldrin's dinners. As the others gather around to congratulate them, Newman points out something strange. Normally, Crescent would be all smug and throwing around sarcastic remarks, but right now, he's surprisingly chill. Even Crescent himself can't quite explain why he's acting this way. Still, Newman reminds him that this could finally be his shot at the long-awaited promotion he's always dreamed of. At that, Crescent snaps back to his usual self and swears he's going to make Newman work her tail off once he becomes a big shot at the academy. She laughs, relieved to see her friend hasn't changed all that much. Finally, Wembley mentions that the dinner's happening tonight, and that he and Zenos should meet in the main hall later. With the exciting news hanging in the air, Bernardo proudly says the risk he took to bring in the underground healer was worth it, and that his job is nearly done. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.